Chapter 10:30. Since he had nothing to do, Grimm decided to settle down in Cursling Castle. The injury to his right hand was not too serious, and it only took him 3 days to recover. On the other hand, he spent a lot of time sorting through the large amounts of information that he had stolen from the association. Fortunately, he had the help of the AI chip. Even so, it took him half a month to sort through everything. Among them, a large amount of basic magic knowledge and experimental content took up 87% of the stolen data. The rest included the organization structure of the association, the list of the members of each department, the distribution of resources every year, as well as the detailed information of the 5 secondary planes. Through this information, it was impossible for Grimm to have a thorough understanding of the operation of the association. However, it was very important for him to gain a deeper understanding of the association from a small part. Whether it was the spiritual illusion wind of freedom or the secondary planes that served as training grounds, they had left a deep impression on Grimm. According to the information, the association had secretly selected a batch of rank 1 and 2 elite magi and sent them to a secondary plane called the Abyss. There, they had subdued a subdragon called the Gray Shadow Dragon. With a companion beast like the Gray Shadow Dragon, the physique of this batch of magi would increase by leaps and bounds. The Gray Shadow Dragon could also make use of the high spiritual force of human magi to increase the power of its special ability. Hence, a rank 2 Gray Shadow Dragon and a rank 2 Magus could display basic battle strength that was not weaker than a regular rank 3 Magus. As the association's hidden trump card, the number of Wyvern mages in this army had already reached up to 100. Most of the ordinary members were rank 1 elite magi. With a rank 1 Gray Shadow Dragon, their battle strength was on par with a rank 2 Magus. The captain or leader was a rank 2 elite Magus. With a rank 2 Gray Shadow Dragon, their battle strength was on par with a rank 3 Magus. Although there were only 100 of these magi, they could display a terrifying battle strength equivalent to 300 to 400 magi of the same rank. Such a powerful team was only known to the outside world because they were stationed in various secondary planes all year round. If the Fabris family had brought out an elite army of this scale in the previous family war, even with the rank 4 Magus Golem Dragon protecting the Crimson family, they would have been wiped out in an instant. After all, there was only one Tier 4 puppet dragon, and the area it could guard and defend was limited. If such a nimble and powerful elite army broke into a family's territory, ordinary Tier 3 magi would not even be able to retaliate, not to mention low-ranked magi who lacked life-saving methods. Other than the Wyvern Wizard Army, the Scattered Pagoda Forest Association had also secretly hidden the Shadow Army, the Wizard Beast Army, and many other trump cards. Of course, their target wasn't the weak sorcerer families, but the 3 major sorcerer organizations that had ulterior motives towards the Scattered Tower Forest. For tens of thousands of years, why had the 3 great sorcerer factions never extended their tentacles to the central continent? Relying on the Scattered Towers and weak sorcerer clans, there was no way they could resist the invasion of any one of the 3 great sorcerer forces. It was precisely because the Tier 4 sorcerers of the central continent had banded together and formed a loose yet cohesive association. That was why they had gathered the strength of 14 Tier 4 sorcerers, as well as the resources of thousands of Scattered Tower Forest organizations, and secretly formed a powerful elite sorcerer team. The actual control of these teams was in the hands of the president, Wizard Fred. However, as long as 3 of the 13 Tier 4 sorcerers worked together, they would have the power to mobilize these teams. To be honest, before seeing these hidden cards, Grimm felt a little disdain towards the Scattered Tower Forest Association. He thought they were just a bunch of conservative frogs in the well who only knew how to fight for power. They had already lost the wolf-like nature and adventurous spirit of sorcerer. However, after learning about these hidden cards, Grimm couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Not long ago, Grimm had already become a little arrogant. He looked down on his Tier 3 opponents and looked down on those Tier 4 sorcerers. He always felt that with his current strength, he could do whatever he wanted in the Central Continent. Even if he caused a huge disaster, with the Crimson family's deep foundation, he could retreat and defend his family's territory without any worries. But now, looking at these hidden cards and thinking about the Crimson family's foundation, Grimm felt for the first time the terror and power of a large sorcerer organization. However, what made him feel even more depressed was that even such a powerful, scattered Tower Forest association could not be considered a large force in the sorcerer world. Compared to the Silver Alliance, the Northern Witches, and the Sorcerer Association, the Scattered Tower Force Association was simply a small force that could not be compared to the top three. In order to better prepare for the upcoming competition, Grimm began to look up the basic information of his three opponents in the database. Gallo, male, belongs to the Ranner family, a Tier 3 bloodline sorcerer. The source of his bloodline is said to be a terrifying undead sovereign. Proficient in close combat, body does not have any fatal points. Basic attributes: Strength 39, Vitality 30, 4 Agility, 17 Spirit, 21 Magic tool used. Tier 3 long sword. Name: Special effects unknown. Dante, male, belongs to the Anemder Academy, a Tier 3 elemental sorcerer. Proficient in communicating with spirits, able to command them to fight. Basic attributes: Strength 13, Vitality 21, Agility 11, Spirit 39, Magic tool used. One of the Wraith, Tier 3, Necklace of Death, Tier 3, Grand Ceremony of Magic, Tier 3. Sanazar, female, belongs to the Cerubo family, a Tier 3 bloodline sorcerer. The source of her bloodline is the powerful Venom Wyvern, a branch of the Poisonous Wyvern. Basic attributes: Strength 25, 33, Vitality 39, 39, Agility 22, 26, Spirit 32, 37. Note: stats after transformation are in brackets. Magic tool used: Heart of Fury, Tier 3, Thorn Armor, Tier 3. Grimm, male, belongs to the Crimson family, a Tier 3 elemental magus, fire specialization. Proficient in controlling fire spells. Basic attributes: Strength 20, Vitality 22, 22, Spirit 39, Magic tool used. 5 pieces of the Blazing Flame Monarch set. Single piece is a Tier 2 magic tool. Set is a Tier 3 magic tool. Strange Magic Ring, Tier 4. Looking at the information of the association projected by the AI chip, Grimm could not help but feel his heart thump. All this while, he had thought that his strength was pretty good. At the very least, among the Tier 3 Magi in the Scattered Tower Forest, he could be considered to be one of the strongest. However, after looking through everyone's information, Grimm was shocked to find that his strength was only ranked 3rd out of the 4 of them. If he did not use any magic tools or support, he would probably be the weakest of the 4. Looking at the glaring statistics of the faceless Magus Garrow, Grimm could not help but feel a little dizzy. If he were to encounter such a violent machine in a small arena, how long would his defensive spells last? Fortunately, Grimm had many trump cards. From the start, Grimm had never been a magus who liked to go into battle and kill on the front lines. That was why in his past battles, he preferred to use his magic puppets to fight at the front while he stayed behind to unleash his powerful firepower as an elemental magus, bombarding his enemies with elemental attacks. Moreover, Grimm now had elemental magic equipment in terms of strength and the plague spirit Remy and his plague creatures in terms of numbers. In terms of firepower, Grimm himself was the most destructive fire magus on the battlefield. With all these factors stacked together, his enemies would not even be able to stand firm if they did not have the slightest bit of strength. After studying the faceless magus for a while, Grimm turned his attention to the other magus, Dante. Grimm was secretly apprehensive of this unconventional elemental magus. It was said that Magus Dante had turned himself into some sort of spiritual creature in order to increase his combat abilities. This way, he could avoid more than 90% of physical damage in battle. His combat style was similar to Grimm's, but he controlled powerful spiritual creatures. These undead creatures were not afraid of swords or physical attacks. and each of them had all sorts of strange abilities. If Grimm and Dante fought, it would probably be a great war filled with vengeful spirits and a sea of fire. Just thinking about it made him look forward to it. As for Sanazar, she was an old acquaintance of Grimm's. When Grimm was still acquainted with this Sanazar, due to the huge difference in their status and strength, it was impossible for Grimm to obtain any secret information. Sanazar had been hiding in the purple mist all year round, and even after knowing her for so long, Grimm did not even know what she looked like or what she looked like. As for what he knew about her, it was not as detailed as the internal investigation of the association. Poison Wyvern. It was also a powerful monster that was extremely difficult to deal with. It had the strong body and magic resistance of a dragon race, and all of its attacks were laced with terrifying poison. Once such a creature became ruthless, it would be quite a headache to fight it head-on. Grimm still had a deep impression of Sanazar's heroism when she fought against a Grade 3 Dragon Knight in the Night Plane. If he suddenly encountered Sanazar, how to defend against her swift and violent attacks would be the key to victory. Moreover, it was impossible that Sanazar had not improved or strengthened over the years. Once Grimm completely believed the information from the association, the situation on the battlefield would be reversed if Sanazar suddenly used some methods other than the information he had obtained. Therefore, the information he stole from the association could only be used as a basic reference for Grimm's battle preparation. He could not trust it completely, and he had to prepare more battle plans and methods to avoid unexpected failure. Moreover, the information was not top secret. If he could easily obtain it, his opponents could naturally do it too. Chapter 1031. Kesslin Castle. In a tightly guarded secret spell hall at the lowest level, a huge ball of light with a diameter of 100 meters floated in the middle of the hall. Through countless beautiful silver-white bands of light, it maintained a close connection with the hundreds and thousands of mystical spell formations in the surroundings. The bands of light were not pure energy. If someone was lucky enough to capture a segment and magnify it by 10,000 times, they would discover that the so-called bands of light were actually densely packed tiny runes intertwined and linked together to form an energy jet. Every tiny dot of light was a miniature runic light formation. There were hundreds and thousands of bands of light, densely packed with dots of light. They intertwined and linked together to form an even more complex and grander runic light formation system. Within the ball of light, a pair of strange, indifferent eyes were silently observing the operation of the entire runic light formation system. Behind the ball of light floated a skinny, withered old magus with almost all his hair gone. Just as the entire runic light formation system was operating in perfect harmony, an abnormally dazzling band of light pierced through countless layers of stone walls, passing through hundreds and thousands of defensive spell formations, and pierced straight into the thin brain of the old man who was sleeping soundly within the ball of light. "Yuri, wake up! Hurry up and wake up!" This voice was abnormally loud, causing the surrounding bands of light to start distorting and vibrating. However, all of this was quickly restored to normal under the gaze of the pair of strange, indifferent eyes, and did not interfere with the operation of the runic light formation. Finally, under the urging of the loud voice, the thin and withered old magus slowly opened his eyes. Damn it! Which bastard came to disturb this old man's sleep again? Don't tell me. Ugh, Lord Fred, why is it you? The old magus had just woken up, and his mind was still a little groggy. He grumbled as he connected to the spiritual stream of consciousness. His weak spiritual force made contact with the other party, and he immediately recognized the latter's unique spiritual undulations. He hurriedly shut his mouth and revealed a flattering smile. "Yuri, you promised me that the revived Kesslin is completely under our control. So what's with the illegal empowerment 2 days ago? Why did it suddenly go out of control?" So that's what it is. Yuri was a rank 3 magus, and he was someone who could shake the world with a single stomp of his foot. However, in front of a rank 4 magus who had come to denounce him, he could only nod his head and hurriedly explain, "It's a small mistake when I was setting up the empowerment rules." "What mistake?" the loud voice asked in dissatisfaction. When I confirm the operating rules for Koslin, all the rank 3 magi in the association will have rank 2 authority. This is the unanimous opinion of all the tier 4 sorcerers in the association. Is there a problem? That kid wasn't a member of the association at that time. The problem is that Koslin sensed the same kind of aura from him, so he regarded him as one of his own and simultaneously triggered the empowerment mechanism. Same kind? You mean that kid also has some kind of activated life in him? Yes. However, the old magus casually added, of course, it could also be something similar to life. The majestic voice was silent for a moment before it said, that's possible. According to the information obtained by the association, Grimm has a soul equipment bound to him, and it's said that he has cultivated it into an existence similar to a contract spirit with its own consciousness. Could it be that Koslin sensed that thing? It's possible, but as for what it is, I'm afraid we can only be sure after we capture that kid and carefully investigate him. President, what do you think? Forget it. We can't touch that kid for now. After a long time, the majestic voice sighed. Recently, the association will be holding a competition. That kid is the main character that we've meticulously prepared, so we can't casually touch him. So, you better keep a close eye on Koslin and don't let him create such a loophole in his defense. Yes, President. Everything will be as you wish. All right, that's all. As the majestic voice dispersed, the colorful belt of light disappeared in an instant. Same kind? Hee. Do you think it's something as simple as a contract spirit? I've heard that the kid can control a giant war puppet that's 100 meters in size by himself, and that he's hiding a strange creature that can assimilate magic metals in another world. If I can dig out the secrets on him, it will be of great benefit to me in controlling Koslin. When only the old sorcerer was left in the secret spell hall, he finally could not help but start mumbling to himself. However, that kid is currently the association's darling. They're counting on him to be their scapegoat. If we want to touch him at this time, I'm afraid. After thinking for a long time, Yuri, who was a grade 3 sorcerer, did not dare to go against the will of a great grade 4 sorcerer. He could only grit his teeth and remember all of this. Only then did he go back to sleep, and his consciousness fused with that giant ball of light. Kesslin Castle. Inside a strange room, Sanazar casually turned off the long-distance communication crystal on the wooden table in front of her and fell into a long period of silence. Just as she was burning with anger, someone knocked on the wooden door of the room. Opening the door, Sanazar was surprised to find 2 powerful sorcerers in strange clothing standing outside, smiling at her. Gallo, Dante, what are you 2 doing here? Sanazar, who was hidden in the purple fog, said in a sharp voice. Why aren't we welcome? You won't even let us into the room? Gallo, the faceless sorcerer who was standing in front, had a strange appearance that was too terrifying. When he smiled at people, the numerous cracks and dense needles on his face began to squirm together. The strong visual impact was not something that ordinary people could bear. After hesitating for a moment, Sanazar finally opened the door and watched the 2 competitors walk in one after another. Closing the door, Sanazar reactivated the protection spell circle and said in a muffled voice, Tell me, what are you 2 doing here? Faceless sorcerer Gallo looked around the room and then turned around. His towering figure that was 2 meters tall, coupled with his terrifying face, was full of pressure. Sanazar, how much do you know about this competition? Wizard Dante, whose figure was blurry and illusory, also stared at the purple fog outside of Sanazar's body with interest. Sanazar did not rush to answer, but coldly stared at Gallo and asked, How much do you know? Gallo grinned. Not much, but it's enough. Sanazar sneered. You are the most promising wizard under Ms. Clara to reach rank 4. Why wouldn't she take care of you? The smile on Gallo's face became even brighter. Ms. Clara did take care of me, but could it be that you don't like Ms. Clara's care? Humph. Sanazar turned around and looked at Dante, who also hurriedly waved his hand. No need to look at me. I've also been warned. Sanazar nodded in understanding and said in a gloomy tone, It seems that we've all received the same information. The winner of this tournament must be that Grimm. Yeah. A bitter smile appeared on Wizard Dante's blurry face. I've also been warned. I don't care how I fight with you two, but if I meet Grim, I will definitely lose. The care I received is almost the same as yours. Jialuo also said angrily with a wretched expression. That brat just offended Mr. Declan, so there's no way the association will support him. That's why I suspect the association wants Grim to become a rank 4 wizard as soon as possible. Do you two have any insider information to share? Sanazar stared at his two companions. Dante shrugged and made an expression as if he didn't know anything. Only Gallo lowered his head and muttered to himself, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he raised his head and said in a low voice with his horrifying face that had been cut and sewn back together, "The association is currently in a big trouble. Those grand wizards from outside the city want all the big organizations to send a rank 4 wizard for a mission. I heard it's quite dangerous." Then it's obvious. This competition is a trap. The association doesn't want to give away the origin substance, but the identity of the wizard. The 4 of us have already reached the peak of rank 3. No matter who gets the origin substance, they will have the highest chance of reaching rank 4. They might even be able to comprehend the power of law in advance. Speaking up to this point, even Sanazar, who is usually calm and steady, couldn't help but feel anxious. Maybe we can fight for it. After all, although the mission from outside the city is a little dangerous, it doesn't mean we'll die. Also, Wizard Dante's voice suddenly became low. In terms of talent and potential, the two of you are much better than me. Your chances of reaching rank 4 are also higher than mine. Talent and potential are nothing. Broken-faced Gallo said coldly. Every time we cross ranks, we have to go through life and death. Are all these rank 4 wizards from the association the strongest rank 3 wizard from back then? There's always a limit to one's hard work. The thing that truly decides our fate is still that damned luck. Speaking up to this point, the 3 magi present couldn't help but feel a little sad. Even if they stepped out of the house, any one of them would be envied by the heavens in the eyes of others. However, they knew that the illusionary glory of the past did not help in advancing to rank 4. None of them had more than a 50% chance of reaching rank 4. This also meant that leveling up was a huge gamble. If they won the gamble, they would naturally advance to the next level and become a top-notch magus that no one in the magus world could restrain. However, if they lost the gamble, there were too many failures that left them depressed and unable to recover from the setback. There were countless cases of them becoming marginal figures. Flipping through the historical records of the scattered forest of underground towers, where were so many heaven-sent geniuses and geniuses. After all, only these 14 people could be remembered by the people. Perhaps this was the darkness hidden behind the glorious aura of the Magi community. I don't care what you think. Anyways, I will fight for those origin substance. Broken-faced Gallo laughed sinisterly and turned to leave after saying this. Wizard Dante sighed again and could only leave with a heavy heart. Chapter 1032. Mary arrived at Cursling Castle 7 days later, accompanied by Meryl and Amelia. The moment she saw Grim, she began to complain. Why are things happening one after another? It's only been a few decades, and now there's this competition? Do those old fellows have nothing better to do? Why are they giving you resources? Grim interrupted her nonsense with a smile. Otherwise, if these words fell into the ears of those tier 4 sorcerers, it would be enough to cause trouble for Mary. Since you already know that they're giving me resources, why are you so angry? Don't let your guard down. I've heard a lot of news on my way here. None of the 3 opponents are easy to deal with, and they're all at the top of the grade. 3 magi? Mary said worriedly. That's right, teacher. You have to be careful. I have a feeling that there's a conspiracy behind the association's invitation. Meryl frowned. She was becoming more and more like a red dragon witch, and her words and actions were filled with a strong self-confidence that could not be questioned. However, it was only in front of Grim that she would show such a worried expression. Amelia usually got along well with Mary and Meryl, and when she heard that there was a show to watch, she naturally rushed over excitedly. Seeing the rare expressions on her 2 companions' faces, She could not help but chuckle. I think you two are worrying too much. The master has always been a cautious person. If there's really a great danger, he won't agree so easily. Mary, who was wearing a fiery red leather suit, glared at Grim. That guy isn't as smart as you think. That Alice must have given him some sort of hint, and that's why he's willing to bet everything on it. Lady Alice is the leader of the Witches of Destiny. If even she thinks highly of Teacher... Ouch! Mary pinched Meryl hard before she could finish her sentence, and she could not help but cry out in pain. Humph! If that Alice is really that powerful, why doesn't she dare to leave the Tower of Destiny? Last time, she said that Invic would be good for Grim, and what happened? Grim was almost trapped in there. But Teacher still came back safely, and he even brought back a lot of benefits. That was exchanged with my life. Mary looked annoyed. Maybe Alice does have some skills. She can easily help you figure out where the treasure is and where the thing you need the most is. The only thing she couldn't figure out was what was crouching beside the treasure. Think about it. A human hero believes the words of the old witch and barges into the treasure cave, only to discover a dragon by accident. A dragon can indeed be considered a moving treasure, but does that human hero have the life to enjoy it? Winlear and Amelia looked at each other in surprise. They didn't expect Lady Mary, who had always been hot-tempered and impulsive, to say something so insightful. Indeed, the Witches of Destiny more or less had some problems in this area. They could indeed help people find the most efficient shortcut, but they would always ignore the risks of the shortcut, whether intentionally or unintentionally. If he followed their instructions, he would definitely reap a bountiful harvest. However, once they encountered danger, it would be extremely dangerous. After all, danger and opportunity always coexisted. Master, it's so dangerous this time. Why didn't Lady Alice come personally? Amelia asked in confusion. Meryl shook her head lightly. This is the scattered forest of towers, and it's still very wary of the three major forces. They won't welcome Lady Alice. Teacher, will there be any danger to your life when you participate in the competition this time? Meryl asked softly. I've already used all my power to investigate, but I didn't get any results. The association's appearance in this competition is very strange, but the wizards we can contact are too weak, so we can't get any information. Meryl, don't worry. I'm quite confident in this competition. Those opponents won't be able to do anything to me. All right, teacher, this is the information about the three opponents we've investigated. Find a chance to take a look. Meryl took out a piece of parchment and handed it to Grim. Grim took the parchment and looked at it. It was filled with information about Gallo, Dante, and Sinazar. Although it was not as detailed as the association's information, it was enough to outline their basic information and combat habits. What do you think? Do you have any special feelings about running into an old friend? Mary stared at Grim with a cruel smile on her face. Sinazar had once been the synonym of a powerful wizard in Grim and Mary's eyes. The two of them were well aware of her prowess. However, at this moment, Grim had grown from an inconspicuous tier 1 sorcerer into a powerful sorcerer on par with her. This subtle and complicated change in mentality was something that could not be fully described by those who had experienced it themselves. At the very least, when Grim thought of this, his emotions surged and he could not calm down. As for what Sinazar was thinking right now, it was hard to explain in a few words. Regardless of what Grim and Sinazar were thinking, Cothran Castle had become the center of a huge whirlpool. The sudden announcement of the competition 10 days ago had shaken the entire scattered forest of towers. After all, it had been hundreds of years since a new Grade 4 wizard had appeared in the Central Continent. From the content of the competition announced by the association, it was not a selection for all Grade 3 wizards. Instead, it was a predetermined selection of 4 participants: Face-Smashing Wizard Gallo, Psychic Wizard Dante, Venomous Wyvern Sinazar, and the newly risen legendary Fire Wizard Grim. Strictly speaking, these 4 were true powerhouses at the peak of Grade 3. With the source substance rewarded by the association, it was almost certain that they would advance to Grade 4. After all, The birth of a grade 4 wizard would greatly change the power structure of the local wizards, even triggering a wave of change. Hence, all the wizard families and organizations that heard the news sent their representatives to Cothran Castle. Watching the competition was only one of the reasons. The main reason was to find out who the new grade 4 wizard was. After all, being able to maintain a good personal relationship with a grade 4 wizard in advance was something that most wizard families could not ask for. On one of the airships heading towards Fort Kesslin, it was packed with representatives and plenipotentiary envoys from various regions of the scattered Talon Forest. Among them were a few magi wearing the Salubo family's insignia. I can't believe that kid is so powerful. He's already on the same level as Master Sinazar. The one who spoke was Wizard Forgan from the Salubo family. The kid he kept mentioning was naturally the traitor Grim, who everyone was afraid of. Master Forgan, please don't mention him too much. This is not our family's base. If word gets out, Wizard Forgan was still cautious as he reminded Forgan with worry. What's there to be afraid of? Wizard Forgan said angrily. No matter how fast he climbs, he still has to be ranked behind Master Sinazar. Didn't you hear the ranking made by those wizards? Our Master Sinazar is ranked 2nd, and that guy can only be ranked 3rd. Traitor. This ranking had only appeared recently. In the past, there were not many people who could reach the peak of rank 3. That was why Gallo, Sinazar, and Dante were the cream of the crop among the Tier 3 wizards, firmly occupying the top 3 spots. Unfortunately, with the rapid rise of this legendary fire wizard, the top 3 had become 4. The poor wizard psychic was forced out of the top 3 and fell to 4th place. This ranking was obviously based on the wizard who had the highest chance of winning this competition. It had to be said that Facebreaker Gallo, who represented the Ranner family and was in charge of the elite Bleeding Pike team, was no less famous than Grim in the scattered forest of towers. It was just that the legendary fire wizard had used the power of a rank 4 magic weapon to defeat the rank 4 wizard Declan, which was why Gallo's glory had been taken away. However, this competition would not allow the legendary fire wizard to take advantage of others. Therefore, after comparing the basic information of all the participants, some nosy wizards came up with a basic ranking. Ranked 1st was naturally Wizard Facebreaker Gallo, who had been famous for hundreds of years. He was a powerful wizard who had traveled to other planes and killed the undead monarch with his own hands. Although the undead monarch was not as powerful as the wizards of the sorcerer world, it was still a powerful rank for existence. It was because of this coincidental killing that Wizard Gallo had obtained an extremely powerful immortal body. More than 70% of his current battle prowess was pinned on this undying body. Ranked 2nd was the tyrannical Wizard Sinazar of the Sarubo family. She had inherited a strange bloodline called the Venom Wyvern, which allowed her to turn into a powerful Venom Wyvern in battle. Not only did she have a strong physique and extraordinary magic resistance, but she also had the power of venom. Therefore, ordinary rank 3 wizards were no match for Sinazar after her transformation. Ranked 3rd was the legendary fire wizard Grim, who had a legendary story that could not be told to an end. It was because of his miraculous rise that he had created a few terrifying records in the central continent that no one could match. It was said that Wizard Grim had been a rank 1 wizard for about 200 years. 200 years might be a long time for ordinary humans, but for sorcerers, it was just a slightly longer journey. 200 years might be enough for a normal wizard to reach rank 1, but Wizard Grim had already climbed to the peak of rank 3. Chapter 1033. While Forgan and Kogan were whispering to each other, a young wizard standing beside them was lost in thought. It seemed like the name the 2 wizards kept mentioning had brought back some memories. The young wizard stood there in a daze, with a face full of confusion and annoyance. No one knew what he was thinking. "Am. Wizard Forgan called him twice before he could wake the young wizard up. "Oh, Mr. Forgan, you called me? I was too engrossed in my thoughts just now." The young wizard A.M. forced a smile and quickly bowed to the rank 2 Wizard Forgan. "It's nothing. I just wanted to remind you. I heard that your class advancing partner, Meryl has also arrived at Cursling Castle. We might bump into them there, so you better be prepared. Damn it, even this little brat had already advanced to the Second Order. What's wrong with this world? M's body trembled, and he quickly bowed his head in acknowledgement. Forgan and Kogan glanced at him for a second and then looked away. However, there was a trace of sympathy and vigilance in their eyes. In terms of status, this AM was the senior brother of the powerful fire dragon, Witch Meryl. They were both apprentices personally taught by Grimm. However, there was a huge difference between the two of them. Meryl was only a normal female apprentice with average talent. Being able to reach rank 1 could be said to be a blessing from the heavens. She had used up all the luck in her life. In comparison, Am's potential after reaching rank 1 was definitely much higher than Meryl's. With Meryl's talent that made people shake their heads, it would already be considered good if she could reach the intermediate rank before she died. Wizard AM, on the other hand, was estimated to be at the advanced rank 1. If he was lucky, he could reach the peak of rank 1 before his lifespan came to an end, and he might even have a chance to reach rank 2. Therefore, no matter what, Am's potential should be better than Meryl's. Unfortunately, life would never develop smoothly according to one's expectations. Since Meryl was able to advance to Tier 1, she was naturally very grateful to her teacher. Hence, she constantly protected her teacher, displaying her loyalty. Even though there was a grudge between Grimm and the higher-ups of the Cerubo family, she chose to stand on her teacher's side without hesitation. As for AMU, she chose another path. Under Wizard Forgan's persuasion and enticement, Am was not optimistic about Grimm leaving the Cerubo family, so he was willing to be a spy and a spy. It was because of his betrayal that the Blazing Flame Monarch's internal information flowed into Wizard Forgan's hands. The first time the Blazing Flame Monarch faced a crisis of destruction was when the Tier 3 vampire led a large number of his family members in a large-scale attack. Based on the situation at that time, Grimm's faction had no chance of surviving. Using that crisis, AM had officially left Grimm's camp and returned to the Cerubo family. He was rewarded by Wizard Forgan and accepted as his disciple. However, what happened next was beyond everyone's expectations. Not only was Grimm's faction not wiped out, they even used the crisis to rise again. They massacred the vampire family, repelled the allied forces of the 5 Magus families, and killed the Tier 3 Magus Yurga in a fair fight. Recently, the Crimson family had even defeated the Fabris family, one of the 5 super families in the Scattered Tower Forest. His former teacher even showed off his might and chased away the rank 4 Magus, Declan. This series of events was simply dazzling, but it was also hair-raising. This was especially so when AM heard that in order to reward Meryl for her loyalty and hard work, Grimm had wasted his precious fire dragon bloodline on her. To be honest, Am's heart was torn to pieces the moment he heard this news. He locked himself in his residence and smashed everything in the house, including the rare alchemy experiment table he'd spent a large amount of resources to buy. The crazed AM even summoned a few of his female acolytes and groped them for 3 days and 3 nights before he finally calmed down. Of course, AMU spent a lot of resources to cover up the incident. However, from that day onwards, his heart had been turned upside down. When he was still an acolyte, out of the 5 acolytes under Grimm, he was the only one with the fire element. He had fantasized over and over again that if he was still by Grimm's side, who else would be able to inherit the powerful fire element talent of a legendary fire wizard other than himself? It was this unrealistic fantasy that tormented Am deeply. He thought about it day and night, almost to the point of going berserk. He had no choice. He had to think about it. His identity and everything he'd done were already known to the members of his family. Hence, even if the faraway Crimson family did something, the members of the Cerubo family would look at him with a strange expression. He hated those expressions. He did not need anyone's pity, did not want to see others rejoice in his misfortune, and did not want to hear anything related to the Crimson family. Unfortunately, the Crimson family's actions were too earth-shattering and unimaginable. When the Fabris family moved out in large numbers and attacked the Crimson family's territory with irresistible force. The Crimson family was beaten to the point where they could not resist and could only retreat to their last isolated city. All the Magi of Salubo ran over to praise AMU's excellent foresight for jumping out of that terrifying pit of fire ahead of time. For a while, AMU was glad about it. However, when the legendary fire wizard chased away the Tier 4 wizard the moment he appeared and crushed the Fabris family's army, all the Sarubo family's wizards fell silent. When they looked at AMU again, it was as if they were looking at the biggest, stupidest fool in the world. During that period of time, AM had also lost a lot of weight. To be honest, when he heard that the legendary fire wizard had caused a huge commotion and actually managed to squeeze into the Scattered Tower Forest Association's rank 3 wizard selection, AM was extremely calm. Originally, Wizard Forgan and Wizard Kogan did not plan to bring AM along when they went to Kothrin Castle, but for some reason, AM actually begged his teacher to bring him along. As for the reason, even AM himself could not explain it. He no longer wanted to go back and evaluate the choices he had made in the past. Right now, he just wanted to see his former teacher with his own eyes, to see his former companion. As for why he wanted to see it, and what he wanted to do after seeing it, to be honest, AM had no clue. 5 days later, the floating airship finally arrived at Kothrin Castle. Following the dense flow of people, they got off the airship, and in front of them was a beautiful giant square. The whole place was paved with white moonstone, and it shone brightly under the warm sunlight. If it were nighttime, the white moonstone, which had stored a day's worth of light elements, would emit a hazy, illusory, and gentle light, making this place even more beautiful. In the center of the square stood a giant stone statue. It was 100 meters tall, wearing a wizard robe, and his face was hale and hearty. The statue of the old wizard was carved out of a giant stone. Whether it was his eyebrows, skin, or clothes, they were all extremely lifelike. The details were even more exquisite. At first glance, anyone would think this giant stone statue was a living wizard looking down at every outsider that came to Kothrin Castle. So this is Wizard Jonard, the first president of the Scattered Tower Forest Association. Wizard Forgan looked up at the wizard statue and sighed in awe. Of course, Kogan and AM, who were following behind him, knew what Wizard Forgan was feeling was not the glory of this President Jonard, but his regret. No matter how talented this President Jonard was, he still could not cross the threshold of rank 4 and become a true Grand Wizard. Therefore, he was destined not to be immortal. After living for 1,173 years, he died of old age in Kothrin Castle. However, this was Kothrin Castle, so if he said the second half of his sentence, it would offend the association. Therefore, Wizard Forgan could only express his emotions by praising the statue. Fire Dragon Witch. It's the Fire Dragon, which, suddenly, for no reason, a commotion broke out among the wizards that were slowly admiring the scenery of Kothrin Castle on the square. Low gasps could be heard one after another. Fire Dragon, Witch Merrill, Wizard Forgan, and the other two were slightly stunned. They quickly turned their heads towards the direction of the sound. Near a stone arch on the west side of the plaza, 2 young witches in high spirits stood side by side, greeting a group of magi who had just disembarked from the airship from afar. In the past 10 years, the Crimson family had been quietly labeled as a rank 4 force by the outside world, and more wizard families were willing to form an alliance with them. Especially those small and medium-sized families that were not powerful enough, they were more willing to get close to a new family like the Crimson family, hoping to borrow their power to resist the covetous eyes of the surrounding forces. Therefore, as one of the most powerful wizards in the Crimson family, Fire Dragon Witch Merrill, even if she was tens of thousands of miles away, she still had to maintain a close relationship with some of her family's allies. Today, a few of the Crimson family's allies had rushed to Kothrin Castle to support them, so Merrill came to the parking area to welcome them. Other than a few of her family's allies, Merrill and Amelia also smiled and greeted the wizards that came forward to express their friendliness. The 2 beautiful witches of different shapes and sizes stood side by side, giving people a refreshing sense of beauty. In the past, Meryl could not be considered a great beauty. At most, she could only be called gentle and beautiful. But now, under the nourishment of the abundant fire dragon bloodline, her limbs and waist seemed especially slender and slender. Her tender and clean skin was overflowing with a layer of surging energy aura, giving people a feeling that she was filled with great power and swelling. Beauty in the secular world had lost its value in the eyes of the wizards. Only unparalleled power could be recognized as beauty. Chapter 1034. Kethrin Castle looked strangely enchanting after it was dressed up. The main road leading to the castle was paved with countless pieces of bluestone of the same shape and size. It sloped upwards, following the winding terrain all the way to the grand golden gate of the main castle. Both sides of the road were filled with shops and small fountains scattered all over the place. Each area was different from the others, presenting a myriad of different and colorful scenes. The architectural styles around Kethrin Castle were also varied. There were domes, pointed roofs, square roofs, colorful agate glass walls, and exquisite murals everywhere. In order to welcome the representatives of the sorcerer families from all over the world, the whole of Kethrin Castle was dressed up in a new style, giving off an exceptionally pleasing impression. The sorcerers who came here came in all sorts of strange vehicles. Other than the public airships, there were also some wizards who rode wyverns, griffins, Socrates eagles, two-headed chimeras, and other flying magical beasts. As for the wizards with more unique tastes, they might ride wild elephants, armored bears, Morikawa goats, magic-claw lizards, and other terrestrial magical beasts slowly coming here. These accompanying magical beasts and magical beasts could not be brought into Kethrin Castle. They could only be kept in the large stations on the periphery of the square. Here, the wizards who work hard to receive the many wizards were elite acolytes trained by the association. Not only were they well-dressed and elegant, but they also had impressive strength. With their strength, if they were placed in those small clans, they would probably be the future stars of the clan that they would hold in their hands and be afraid of falling. But here, they could only lower themselves to do the work that ordinary servants needed to do. It cannot be helped. There are simply too many wizards who came to Kethrin Castle during this period of time, and their strength varied. If ordinary servants were used to receive those grade 2 and 3 wizards, they would probably have to replace them every half an hour. After all, most of the high-grade wizards were eccentric and eccentric. If they did not deliberately restrain their surging wizard energy, ordinary mortals would not be able to withstand the terrifying elemental radiation. Most of the foreign wizards were obviously not qualified to step into Kethrin Castle. They could only temporarily find a place to stay near the castle and wait for the arrival of the tournament. Every day, there would be a majestic floating airship arriving at the parking area. Then, a large group of magi wearing standard magi robes with the insignia of their families would disembark. Under the guidance of the association's magi, they would board black carriages and head towards the main castle. These were the well-known large clans and organizations in the scattered pagoda forest region. Naturally, they wouldn't feel wronged and stay outside the main castle. They were obviously familiar with the magi of the association. As soon as they arrived, they all gathered together and hid in a secret room, whispering to each other. Regarding this competition, outsiders naturally had no idea what the higher-ups of the association were thinking. However, if the competition was able to select one of the strongest contestants to reach Tier 4, then they would be able to obtain information about the competition one day earlier. Naturally, they would be able to gain an advantage in the upcoming changes. Naturally, Tier 4 sorcerers would not be interested in such a small benefit, but it could determine the rise and fall of those small and medium-sized sorcerer families or factions. Therefore, they couldn't help but be nervous. Of course, the selection of the strongest Tier 3 contestants had also attracted the attention of the other 3 major factions. It was said that the 3 major factions had already sent out secret observers to observe the competition. They wanted to understand the progress of strength in the scattered pagoda forest region over the years. As for the competition's venue, It was chosen to be a secondary plane called the Blue Sea. For peak tier, 3 powerhouses would be divided into 2 groups, and they would be teleported to different areas of the Blue Sea plane. There, a long battle that would last for 15 days would unfold. Both participants would have half a fixed teleportation crystal on them. As long as they successfully snatched the other party's teleportation crystal and fused it into one, they would be able to return to Kesslin Castle smoothly. The one who successfully returned to Kesslin Castle would be the winner of the competition. If both participants were unable to snatch the other's teleportation crystal, then they would both lose and become eliminated. As for the finals, they would be held 15 days later. The rules and method would be the same, and the winner would be the one who obtained the teleportation crystal and successfully returned. This meant that the person who wanted to become the strongest Tier 3 contestant in the Scattered Pagoda Forest region would have to defeat 2 competitors consecutively within 30 days. This was not only a contest of strength, but it was also a test of perseverance. Of course, if one of them could defeat his opponent within a day and send it back to Kesslin Castle, not only would he have an additional 14 days of rest, but he would also have the opportunity to watch the next battle. Understanding more about one's opponent would undoubtedly be of great help in the upcoming battles. However, while this sounded good, it was not realistic. After all, the few selected sorcerers were all peak tier 3, and each of them had experienced hundreds of battles and had rich combat experience. In a situation where one's strength could not completely suppress their opponent, no one would be able to defeat their opponent easily. Blue Sea Plain. This was a small plain that occupied a vast area and was rich in biological and mineral resources. Ever since it became a subordinate secondary plain of the Scattered Pagoda Forest Association, the strongest natives of this plain had either been killed or captured. It had already been completely cleaned up. The remaining natives had become slaves and miners under the association, and they were busy working in various plantations and dark mines. However, today, this place had become the battlefield for a few Tier 3 magi who had crossed over from another plane. In a dense forest near the west coast, a dense white light suddenly lit up. Soon after, a tall figure walked out of the white door of light that was filled with dense, vibrating mist. He frowned as he surveyed this completely unfamiliar plane world. The moment he stepped out of the teleportation door, Grim felt an overwhelming sense of malice. Under the suppression of the powerful will of the plane, the surging magic energy on his body rapidly decreased, and in the blink of an eye, it was suppressed to the initial rank 2. It was as if an elephant had been forcefully stuffed into a shoe. Being in such a small and suffocating plane, even if he did not meet any enemies, Grim could still feel the pain in his limbs and bones. Looks like the first round of the battle revolves around the suppression of the plane. Whoever adapts to the environment here first will be able to display greater strength. Chip, start analyzing the laws of the plane here. Beep. Mission accepted. Estimated time of analysis is 11 hours, 29 minutes, 31 seconds. 11 hours. I'll use this time to find my opponent. However, who will my opponent be? In Kothrin Castle, Grim and the other 3 had stepped into the teleportation door at the same time, but they had been sent to different regions in pairs. Hence, at this moment, even Grim did not know who his first opponent would be. Beep. Unknown energy undulations detected. Just as Grim was muttering to himself, the AI chip suddenly sent out a series of prompts, and 7 life forms with strange energy undulations were projected in his retina. Grim raised his head, and his gaze pierced through the swaying branches and leaves of the trees, landing on an eagle that was circling in the blue sky. In Grim's elemental vision, this eagle's body was overflowing with a dense red glow. It was obvious that it was a specially modified wizard beast. Grim squinted his eyes and then turned to look in a few other directions. He found the same red glow on a few deer, squirrels, and spotted snakes. It seemed like these were modified wizard beasts that the association had prepared beforehand to monitor the entire process of the battle. One could imagine that at this moment, there were hundreds and thousands of magi in Cothran Castle, monitoring the actions of the few participants through the eyes of these wizard beasts. Hence, it was better to conceal some of the secrets that he did not want to reveal. Grim suddenly revealed a mischievous smile. He raised his right hand like a pistol and made a shooting gesture toward a squirrel that was hiding in the dense treetops 100 meters away. Asterisk paw. Asterisk with a slight movement of Grim's mouth. The squirrel that was curled up in a green leaf suddenly exploded into a small fireball and was burnt to a crisp in an instant. Grim smiled slightly and pointed his pistol at a deer that was hiding in the bushes 120 meters away. Asterisk paw. Asterisk, there was another soft sound, and the deer's eyes, ears, mouth, and nose suddenly spewed out flames. It struggled to run 5 steps before collapsing and turning into a pile of charcoal. As if they were shocked by Grim's unscrupulous behavior, the creatures shrouded in the red glow began to run as fast as they could. Unfortunately, no matter how fast they ran, they could not outrun Grim's sound effects. After a few shots, 5 of the 7 red dots were extinguished. The eagle moved the fastest. It had already spread its wings and was already 3 miles away. Grim did not want to kill it. After all, this was a monitoring method left by the association, so it was not good to extinguish all of them. All he needed to do was to set a boundary and drive them away. After driving away the eagle, Grim's gaze fell on the roots of a tall, ancient tree. There, a gopher with a red glow was hiding underground, using the soil as a cover. It did not escape. It seemed like the Magi who controlled the wizard beasts did not know how Grim found out about the abnormality, so they were still trying to escape Grim's pursuit. Grim smirked, clenched his right hand into a fist, and smashed it down. 100 meters away, with the ancient tree as the center, the surrounding 20 meters of ground seemed to have been fiercely smashed by an invisible iron fist, suddenly collapsing into a 2-meter-deep pit. All the ancient trees, branches, vines, and bushes were burned into ashes by the invisible flame. In Grim's elemental vision, the red that was also extinguished. How could an ordinary creature that had been transplanted with a witchcraft eye withstand Grim's attack? After blinding all the eyes that were watching him, Grim took out the strange black crystal from his waist pouch. The crystal was only the size of fist, and there was a dense black fog inside, so Grim could not see what was inside. However, as soon as he took it out, a strange vibration was generated from the black crystal. It seemed like it was trying to get out of his control and fly somewhere to the northeast. It seemed like that was where the other teleportation crystal was. Chapter 1035. Teacher's actions just now were so cool. Even a usually calm fire dragon, which turned into a fangirl at this moment, cheering for her teacher with a face full of joy. As a core member of the Crimson family and a relative of Grim, Mary, Meryl, Amelia, and a few other representatives of the Alliance families were allowed to enter a private room and watch the battle between the powerhouses from another plane in a more private environment. The huge light screen before them was divided into more than 100 smaller screens, each projecting a close-up of the 4 contestants from different angles. From this, it could be seen that the association's surveillance of the entire battlefield had reached an all-pervasive level. Even so, as soon as the 4 powerhouses entered the battlefield, the projection on the screen began to darken. Those who could participate in the battle between the powerhouses were all carefully selected rank 3rd kings. Naturally, they would not allow the surveillance beasts set up by the association to get too close to their battlefield. Hence, they struck out at the eyes that were too obvious or too close to the battlefield. However, it was obvious that the association had expected this. The darkened screens lit up one after another, changing into another angle of the eyes of another wizard beast that quickly approached the contestants from the periphery of the battlefield. Although it could not observe the contestants unscrupulously from a close distance like before, it could still observe their movements from afar. At this moment, Grim had transformed into a huge fireball, dragging a long trail of flames as he traversed through the lush forest. In the past, such an action would have long set everything on fire, leaving a clear trail of fire behind him. But now, Grimm's control over fire was becoming more and more proficient. The fireball he had transformed into was like an illusory shadow. There were bright yellow flames in the air, but no change in temperature could be felt. All the fire energy was stored in the core of the fireball, not a single bit leaking out. This way, those who relied on elemental changes to track their enemies would not be able to discover Grimm's true location as long as they could not see the fireball with their naked eyes. Grimm did not choose to fly into the sky openly, choosing instead to turn into a fireball and approach his opponent stealthily. After all, under the suppression of the realm force, he could not display his full strength. Moreover, even at this moment, he did not know who his enemy was. Under such circumstances, there was no way to formulate a follow-up strategy. Therefore, after entering the planar battlefield, Grimm's first choice was to approach the enemy stealthily. After confirming the enemy's identity, he would decide whether to attack or engage in guerrilla warfare. It only took Grimm half an hour to cover the distance of 100 li. The teleportation crystal he had on him could barely pinpoint the enemy's position, but could not mark the distance of the enemy. Therefore, Grimm was not worried that the enemy would set a trap for him. After all, at this moment, everyone was under the suppression of the plane. Under the circumstances that they were unable to display their full strength, it was rather difficult for anyone to kill their opponent. Therefore, the early stages of the battle were still focused on reconnaissance and finding openings. This was a secluded valley deep in the forest. The dense forest that was originally overflowing with vitality and a myriad of living creatures was now deathly silent. Tall and straight trees were densely packed together, and the gaps in the forest were covered by dense branches and leaves, crisscrossing vines and vines. At the bottom of the tree roots were dense thorns and shrubs that grew randomly. In such an environment, it was almost impossible for a normal person to move an inch without cutting down the thorns and vines that blocked the way. However, in such a hot and harsh environment, a strange fireball suddenly rushed out of the forest and descended into this secluded valley. The fireball froze in midair. A pair of bright and spirited eyes opened within the raging flames, cautiously and meticulously scanning everything in the secluded valley. Soon he discovered something. The fireball appeared in a clearing in the forest in a flash, and the eyes within the flames stared unblinkingly at a drop of green liquid hanging from a bush. As the mountain wind blew, the bushes swayed gently, and the drop of green liquid slowly evaporated. As soon as the faint green mist enveloped them, the green plants began to rapidly wither and wither. It seemed that his first opponent was that old acquaintance, Senazar. From the moment he laid eyes on the venom, Grimm had basically confirmed his opponent. The I chip in his mind operated rapidly, and it began to formulate various battle plans around the venom wyvern. Information on Senazar, her temperament, her battle habits, and her equipment. Everything quickly flowed into Grimm's mind, forming a character model that became clearer and clearer. When Senazar's model was completed, Grimm's body suddenly expanded, turning into a 10-meter-tall flaming man that rose into the sky, following which an earth-shattering roar resounded above the vast sea of trees. The voice was as loud as a bell, and as loud as a clap of thunder, shaking the sea of trees and startling birds. Leaves could be seen falling everywhere like snowflakes. Grimm did not use any tricks or schemes. He used the simplest and most direct method to challenge the arrogant Tier 3 witch to a duel. As if sensing Grimm's berserk desire for battle, a cloud of purple mist rose into the sky from the sea of trees 30 miles away, confronting the flaming man Grimm had turned into. Senazar was an extremely arrogant and narcissistic person. She acted rashly and crudely, often not considering the consequences of her actions. This was also one of the main reasons why Grimm and the Cerubo family had parted on bad terms. It was precisely because he understood Senazar's temperament that Grimm skipped the unnecessary steps of probing and warming up and directly used the most violent method to provoke her. She was a veteran Tier 3 magus, and she had practically watched Grim grow from mere Tier 1 magus to the point where he could be mentioned in the same breath as her. To be honest, this was extremely unbearable for her. No matter how miraculous Grim's reputation as a legendary fire magus was, in Sanazar's heart, he was still the same small fry that she had been before. Although she knew that this was not the right thing to do, she just could not accept the fact that he was a fire magus. Hence, when faced with a challenge from a small fry, even though Sanazar was still suppressed by the power of the plane, she did not hesitate to accept the challenge. Looking at the towering flame giant in the sea of trees, Sanazar, who was only 172 meters tall, showed no fear. She could sense it clearly. Although the flaming man looked terrifying, the strength of the flame force field around him was not that strong. It was obvious that the flame giant was being suppressed by the power of the plane. In such an environment, the correct choice was to reduce unnecessary energy consumption as much as possible. Moreover, the flame giant had forcefully condensed flame force and expanded his body to such an extent. One could imagine how much of his flame force was being consumed. At the rank of Tier 3, Magi's magic resistance had reached an astonishing level. In the past, the power of large-scale elemental spells was not as powerful as single-target spells that could condense flame force. As for using his elemental body to intimidate the enemy, this might be useful against low-ranked Magi, but against a rank 3 magus of the same strength, it was just a bluff. Kid, you haven't experienced a battle of this level, have you? Today, I'll let you know the power of a true rank 3 magus. Sanazar's slightly hoarse voice came from the purple mist, which then turned into a roar similar to that of a wild beast. The purple mist continued to expand, and very soon, it covered an area of nearly 100 meters. In the middle of the fog, there seemed to be an enormous creature roaring and struggling. From time to time, a thick and long tail and powerful claws would flash past the edge of the fog, but made it difficult for one to see what was going on inside. With a cold snort, Grim condensed a lava fireball and threw it at the purple mist. A pair of dazzling green eyes suddenly lit up in the depths of the mist, and a resounding dragon's roar shook the heavens and earth. A huge figure burst out of the purple mist, smashing the incoming lava fireball with a swipe of its claw. Then, it charged at Grim, leaving a trail of flames behind it. Although the figure was fast, Grim's dynamic vision was still able to capture it. The venomous flying dragon that Sanazar had transformed into was as ugly and brutal as ever. It did not have the awe-inspiring figure of an ordinary dragon, nor did it have the sturdiness and might of a pure-blooded dragon. It was like a skinned green dragon, its body covered in disgusting mucus, covered in abscesses and dark spots. However, the venom wyvern was also a dragon, and it also had the biting cold aura and powerful body of the dragon race. When the venom wyvern's dark green membranous wings flapped in the air, its over 20-meter-long body turned into a bolt of lightning and pounced at Grim with its claws and fangs bared. The fierce aura that it emitted was almost suffocating. Grim raised his hand, and layers of flame shields appeared in front of the venom wyvern's flight path. The venom wyvern opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of green, sticky venom, corroding through 5 of the flame shields in one breath. Only then did it turn into a faint green mist and dissipate. The venom wyvern's momentum didn't slow down at all. It used its powerful body to crush the remaining 3 flame shields and crashed into the last 2 lava shields. Boom! With an earth-shattering explosion, the 2 equally powerful monsters violently crashed into each other. They rolled and tore at each other, carving out a wide and flat path in the depths of the lush forest. In order to strengthen his close combat ability, Grim gave up on his flame body, which had fierce fire attacks, and turned into a terrifying flame demon with a powerful body. Chapter 1036. What kind of scene would it be like for 2 peerless monsters to fight each other? Only the Magi hiding in Cursling Castle who were watching the battle through the many screens could tell you. Sorcerers had always taken wisdom and calmness as their motto. But now, all the Magi could not help but clench their fists and grit their teeth, their bodies trembling as they watched this unparalleled battle. Just this earth-shattering battle between the Balrog and the Poison Wyvern was already worth the price of admission. In front of these two colossal beings, the battle between normal Magi was like playing house, soft and gentle. As for their battle, it was a battle that covered a range of 1 to 2 kilometers. Flaming meteors rained down incessantly, or they would casually pick up an ancient tree that was 2 meters thick and 20 to 30 meters long and smash it at their opponent. The vast sea of trees seemed to have been turned upside down, and the entire ground trembled violently. Huge pillars of smoke and mud surged up, covering the two huge figures that were rolling and fighting. However, before the pillars of dust could disperse, a green ring of poison spread out from the center of the battle, instantly engulfing the surrounding forest. The association controlled 3 mountain eagles flying high in the blue sky. Looking down, they could clearly see a dark green ring of poison spreading in the middle of the green forest. Wherever the ring of poison went, all living things withered and all life was extinguished. Everything, whether it was the tall and straight ancient trees, the tough vines that coiled around them, or the thistles and thorns that grew here and there, withered upon contact with the ring of poison, turning into pools of green liquid that flickered with intense radiation. With the terrifying might of the poison wyvern's poison, even heavy metal puppets could be forcefully corroded, let alone this forest that lacked the protection of magic. The Magi watching this scene in front of the screens were all incomparably shocked. However, before they could even cry out in alarm, there was a muffled bang, and a huge ring of flames suddenly erupted, turning the dust-filled battlefield into a huge sea of flames. The poison and flames collided and destroyed each other. The entire forest was in a mess, and not a single living thing could be seen, not even a single ancient tree. Is this the power of a grade 3 powerhouse? A young wizard who was watching the battle with his clansmen said with a trembling voice. Everyone remained silent. Only the Tier 2 sorcerer said in a low voice, "This isn't even their strongest state. Right now, they're still under the suppression of the plane of existence, so they should only be able to use half of their strength, right?" The sorcerers around him were shocked and speechless. Looking at the two colossal creatures on the light screen, one of them flipped over and flattened a 30 to 40 meters tall cliff that protruded from a sea of trees. Wherever they went, the towering ancient trees toppled over one after another, turned into poisonous swamps, or turned into ashes. Large patches of green jungle instantly disappeared without a trace. And this terrifying power was only half of their strength? What would they look like when they fought with all their might? As low-ranked Magi, they naturally could not understand the battle in front of them. Thus, they could only judge from the intensity of the battle. However, for the high-ranked Magi in Cursling Castle, such a grand and intense battle could not confuse them. Their way of looking at the battle was obviously different from that of ordinary Magi. Hasn't this Grimm always been very smart? Why is he so unwise today, fighting with a bloodline magus like Senazar? A grade 3 magus from the association laughed, his face full of disdain. Yeah, he's an elemental magus, but instead of using his fire spells, he chose to fight with his opponent in close combat. I think he's gone mad. Someone else immediately agreed. Could it be that he's plotting something? Why do I feel that Senazar didn't gain any advantage? Finally, someone voiced out his doubts. Wait, this fire magus attack power is a little strange. Only now did you notice? I already noticed that his basic attack power is a little too high. Did you guys notice that every time he attacks, there's a trace of white light on his fire spells? What's that? It looks like light elements. That's strange. Isn't Grimm specialized in fire spells? What's so strange about that? Maybe it's a gift from his equipment. Although the Magi from the association were vicious and crafty with their words, they were able to clearly analyze everything that had happened on the battlefield. While they were calmly appraising and analyzing, in another secret hall on the upper level of Cursling Castle, A group of Tier 4 sorcerers were sitting together, calmly watching the battle on the screen. Sanazar is a little too impulsive. Yeah, she's still too confident in her poison dragon body. She's completely forgotten that her opponent has two things that can restrain her. Oh, what else is there besides that strange ring? I just found out through a secret channel that the kid has already upgraded his soul equipment to grade 3 and transformed it into the Plague Poison Spirit. With the Plague Poison Spirit protecting him, do you think he'll be afraid of his opponent's poison? I think the key to victory lies in that ring. That pure light element that ignores defense and magic resistance is simply unstoppable. Without a suitable defensive measure, I'm afraid that just the consumption of light element will be too much for him to handle. Clara, don't tell me you didn't prepare a spell tool to resist the light element for Jialu? In my opinion, this Sanazar might not even be able to defeat Grim. Nicholas, you seem to have forgotten the decision we made together. The 14 Magi of the Association have unanimously decided to raise this Grim to grade 4 and bring him into the Association. Since we've already decided to let him win, why should I waste my efforts? I just don't want that kid to be too arrogant. It's not too late for Jialu to teach him a lesson before he loses. Magus Clara was silent for a moment before finally speaking. I know Jialu very well. He's arrogant, and I'm afraid he won't hold back. If I really give him purple blood, I'm afraid he'll really use all his strength to fight Grim. If that happens, the situation will no longer be under my control. On the light screen in front of them, other than the epic battle between Grim and Sanazar, in another area of the Blue Sea Plain, Broken Face Gallo and the psychic sorcerer Dante had also gathered together, chasing and killing each other on a vast grassland. Although both of them were grade 3 Magi at the peak, it was obvious that broken-faced Jialu had the absolute advantage on the battlefield. He was chasing the psychic wizard Dante everywhere. The latter, on the other hand, could only rely on the grade 3 spirit he summoned to sneak attack Jialu in order to relieve the heavy pressure on the battlefield. Dante was indeed a terrifying psychic wizard. The grade 3 spirit he summoned could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. It was almost impossible to guard against it. If Jialu did not transform his body into a strange undead body, he would have long been defeated by the sneak attacks of the spirits. The most powerful skill of the grade 3 spirit that Dante summoned was without a doubt Occupy. It could turn its body invisible and rush into the opponent's body, temporarily occupying the opponent's body. Although this period of time was very short, it was very fatal on a grade 3 battlefield. Jialu's heart and forehead were pierced through by the opponent, and that was the biggest proof. Broken-faced Jialu was indeed a strange monster that could not be killed. Even though his heart and forehead were pierced through by the opponent, he still did not change his expression and continued to chase his opponent with his sword. As for the wizard sword in his hand, it seemed to have some kind of strange power. After the psychic wizard Dante's illusory body was cut by the sword, the part of the illusory body that the wizard's sword touched would be forever lost. Originally, with Dante's illusory body, any physical damage could be avoided or healed by turning invisible. However, facing Jialu's strange wizard sword, Dante's damaged body could never be healed. After this happened twice, Dante did not dare to touch the wizard sword in his opponent's hand anymore. If he could not win in a head-on battle, then he would fight. Thus, Dante made full use of his advantage in moving quickly, luring Jialu to go around in circles on the vast plains. Since there was still plenty of time to battle, he could use his spirit to exhaust his opponent's stamina and counterattack when his opponent's stamina was exhausted. This was the most common tactic used by elemental magi against powerful bloodline magi. As broken-faced Jialu and the psychic wizard Dante chased each other on the plains, tens of thousands of miles away in the depths of the forest, the battle between Grim and Sanazar was in full swing. Compared to the great disparity in strength between the two, Grim and Sanazar's basic strength was not that far apart. The only difference was probably in their close combat techniques. Both sides were locked in a life and death struggle. Grim was at a disadvantage because his body's tempering was far inferior to Sanazar's, and the damage he caused in close combat was far less ferocious and ruthless than Senazar's poisonous claws. Fortunately, with the help of the AI chip's battle support system, he was able to dodge many of Senazar's violent attacks. Only then did he use the holy light from Sodden's divine ring to teach Senazar a lesson. When both sides suddenly separated from each other after a violent collision, the first round of the battle slowly came to an end. Grim used Flame Leap to teleport 1,000 meters away, watching the venom wyvern that had been burnt to a crisp. Only then did he start to grit his teeth and lower his head to deal with the wounds on his body. The bright yellow flames that had been circling around his body had now been dyed green. Even the surface of Grim's body was covered in patches of black, purple, and green. Green mucus flowed out of the dark acne, and the air was filled with a suffocating stench. Chapter 1037. Grim struggled to stand up. At this moment, he did not dare to come out of the Fire Lord's body. Otherwise, the severe injuries on his body would destroy his human body in an instant. A cluster of purple abyssal flames ignited on Grim's indigo demonic right claw as he pressed it against the basin-sized wound on his chest. The muffled sound of the flames exploding could be heard. His entire body was once again ignited with raging flames, dispersing the poison from the 17 wounds of various sizes. If he had enough time, he could have made this operation gentler and more meticulous. However, in front of a great enemy, he could only use such a crude and simple method to heal his wounds in order to recover his battle strength as soon as possible. After the poison was dispelled, Grim's 22 points of vitality could be displayed. Not only did the torn flesh on the surface of his body begin to rapidly heal and shrink, even the 2 huge wounds on his chest and ribs that were almost completely penetrated began to produce countless flesh sprouts from the wounds. They danced wildly as they grew and twisted together. Regardless of how his internal organs had recovered, at least the wounds on the surface of his body had healed, and there were no more gaps in his defense. As for the broken ribs, they were pulled back to their original positions by the intertwining flesh fibers. Although the broken ribs were still there, they were wrapped by layers of flesh, membranes, and tendons and were temporarily fine. Grim was sweating profusely as he urged the power of his witchcraft to stimulate the rapid regeneration of his flesh and blood, repairing the damage and injuries on his body. In just a quarter of an hour, all of Grim's injuries had healed. His body was once again surrounded by flames, and he looked as good as new, at least on the surface. If Grim's 22 points of vitality was already so terrifying, then Senazar's 39 points of vitality was even more monstrous. After the bloody battle just now, Senazar's venom wyvern had already been burnt to a crisp by the terrifying flames. However, as the power of his bloodline surged, Senazar's body shook slightly, and the carbonized skin fell off, revealing the red flesh that was squirming and growing crazily. By the time Grim had recovered half of his strength, Senazar had also completed her self-healing. The burns on the surface of her body were all gone, and she was once again covered by the disgusting mucus secreted from her body. Using the power of magic to recover from injuries was an ability unique to high-ranked magi. As long as the energy in their bodies was not exhausted, they could continuously recover, and recover. This also allowed their combat strength to be maintained at an extremely high level. As a bloodline sorcerer, Senazar's recovery speed was much faster than Grim's. Coupled with his higher magic and physical resistance, Senazar clearly had the upper hand in the first round. As soon as its body was repaired, Senazar roared without hesitation and pounced at Grim again. At this time, Grim was only half healed, so he could only dodge while speeding up his self-healing process. The second round of battle between the two sides began in an instant. Watching the 2 savage and tyrannical monsters collide once again, the many magi in front of the magic screen couldn't help but pay attention to the battle. Especially the magi from different factions. They even silently cheered for the guy they thought highly of. Madame Mary, Master. Seeing this, Winley couldn't help but worry for her teacher. Master is an elemental sorcerer. Why is he fighting against that stinky loach? Mary couldn't help but frown, as if she also didn't understand. On the other hand, Amelia, who was hiding at the side and happily eating a golden tangerine, couldn't help but curl her lips and say, "Of course it's to wear him down." Wear him down? Winley couldn't help but repeat. If it's not to wear him down faster, do you think the head of the family is looking for trouble? Amelia, who had an eccentric background and personality, obviously had a kind of insight and depth to everything that was difficult for ordinary people to understand. Therefore, among the few witches who got along well with her, she had always played the role of advisor and military counselor. Mary wasn't as gentle as Winley. She grabbed Amelia's slender waist and threatened, "Tell me what you've seen. Don't be so hesitant. If you dare to keep me in suspense, I'll bite you." Ouch! The demonic woman, who was in pain, could only roll her eyes and speak her mind as fast as she could. The head of the family issued a challenge right from the start, obviously wanting to get rid of the first enemy quickly. "This, we all know." "What the hell do you know?" "Ouch!" Amelia screamed again. "All right, let's put it in another way. If it's you, how would you quickly get rid of a grade 3 enemy that's as strong as you?" "Fight." Of course, it's a continuous and intense battle. That's right. You've seen it for yourself. These Tier 3 monsters have astonishing defense and recovery abilities. It's impossible to defeat them in one go, unless the head of the family is a Grade 4 and can crush them with absolute strength. You can only fight a battle of attrition. Can't we just rely on battle techniques to defeat the enemy? Ahem, silly girl. Do you think these Grade 3 monsters are idiots? The moment they find themselves at a disadvantage, they'll either change their tactics or change the battlefield. They won't give the enemy the chance to suppress them for long. If the head of the family uses guerrilla warfare and fully displays the might of his elemental magic, do you think this loach will continue to fight with him? It'll definitely be a fight, and the head of the family won't be able to gain the upper hand for long. Amelia smiled slyly. When that happens, the two of them will definitely fight to the death. One will chase after the other, and the other will chase after the other. Neither of them will be able to gain the upper hand. With the recovery of a Grade 3 Magus, it won't be a problem for them to fight for half a month. I'm afraid that the head of the family doesn't want that to happen, which is why he's willing to reveal his weakness and draw that woman to his side. At this point, Mary and Meryl came to a sudden realization. The two of them were very familiar with Grimm's trump cards. If Grimm really wanted to fight with all his might, that elemental magic machine would have appeared long ago. Grimm had been holding on to this trump card for a long time, and it probably had something to do with his current tactics. In the past, the elemental magic machine would charge at the front and exhaust the enemy's strength. When the enemy was exhausted, Grimm would then take advantage of the situation. However, in this battle, Grimm had clearly treated himself as a pawn, and the elemental magic machine was his final trump card. Such a decision and battle style were clearly out of everyone's expectations. However, could it really fool his enemy? That Sanazar was only impulsive and tyrannical, but she was not stupid. Even if the other party couldn't see through all of Grimm's schemes, he could still guess most of them. However, with an advantage right in front of her, she would not let it go. When both sides revealed their trump cards, it was still unknown who would be the winner. Compared to the Crimson family's group, the Cerubo family's group was more fervent. Every time the Venom Wyvern broke through the Balrog's burning domain with its powerful physique and magic resistance, starting a world-shaking battle with the Balrog, the wizards of the Cerubo family would involuntarily clench their fists and scream. Bite his throat, dodge that fireball. Ah, what a pity. Be careful of his flame whip. It didn't matter if it was the rank 2 wizard Forgan or the rank 1 wizard Kogan and AM. They were all so nervous that they were trembling and screaming with their teeth clenched. On the screen, it seemed like their yelling and cheering had some effect. It was obvious that Sanazar had the upper hand in the battle. The flame devil's skin was split open, and purple blood was dripping from its body. In comparison, the damage suffered by the Venom Wyvern was much lighter than its opponent. Although it was not an overwhelming advantage, It was slowly turning the tide of the battle in Senazar's favor. This was already the fourth round of the battle. Senazar seemed to have seen an opportunity to win. Even if her body was severely injured by the flames, she would not retreat. She would not give Grim the chance to retreat and heal his body. Although both sides were constantly causing damage to each other, they were also constantly suffering heavy blows that were hard for outsiders to imagine. However, as long as the opponent was more injured than her, it would be a small victory. With Senazar's 39 points of vitality, an attack below 300 degrees wouldn't even be able to scratch her skin. Only an attack above 500 degrees would be able to leave visible wounds on her skin. However, this kind of injury was really nothing. If the opponent's attack speed was just a little bit slower, the wounds might not even be as fast as Senazar's healing speed. An astonishingly powerful and violent fireball exploded on the surface of Senazar's body, the surging flames scorching a bowl-sized scorch mark. However, when the shockwave of the flames slowly dissipated, the scorch mark also began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye and disappeared. Perhaps when the energy of the flames completely dissipated, the scorch mark would be as clean as new. Senazar's powerful physique and extremely strong resistance to attacks gave her the capital to fight a bloody battle with her enemies. Chapter 1038. The battle between Grim and Senazar had completely destroyed the vast forest. In just 3 short days, the strength of the two had gradually climbed from the bottom to the peak, and from the peak, it had fallen bit by bit. The 2 points in time, in particular, showed how powerful they were. The first point was 10 hours after the battle started. Grim, who had been suppressed by Senazar's powerful strength and frightening physique, suddenly burst out with astonishing strength. He actually managed to fight Senazar to a standstill with just his physical strength. From then on, Grim, whose strength had skyrocketed, turned the tables on Senazar and beat her up. His strength was not any weaker than Senazar's. Coupled with his powerful fire spells and the unstoppable holy light, all of these became Grim's trump cards. He had suppressed Senazar and beaten her to a sorry state. Fortunately, this situation only lasted for 8 hours. In the 18th hour after the battle started, Senazar, who was at a complete disadvantage, suddenly had her strength skyrocket. Only then was she able to resist Grim's madness, and the situation returned to the delicate and fragile balance from before. These 2 points in time were naturally the time when they had analyzed the laws of the plane and broken free from the plane suppression. Those who were observant could naturally deduce some information about them that they were not willing to reveal to the public. Both of them were peak grade 3 magi. Although there was a difference in elemental and bloodline systems, their strength should have been about the same. However, Grim had actually broken free from the plane suppression 8 hours earlier than Senazar. This number was enough to raise some people's suspicions. At this moment, although the suppression of the plane's strength still existed, it was almost negligible. The terrifying destructive power displayed by the 2 Tier 3 magi, who were able to display their full strength, was vividly displayed in this battle. After a full 27 hours of frenzied battle, fighting for nearly 100 miles, this green forest had been ravaged to the point where it was badly battered and devoid of life. Wherever the two passed, the greenery would fade and everything would perish. The scorched ground was covered with deep and shallow scorch marks and dotted with holes. At the bottom of these pits were either scorched earth cracks that were as dense as spider webs or glaring green mucus. Looking down from the sky, the center of the green forest that stretched for tens of thousands of miles was covered with dark spots that looked like the head of a scab. Dark red lava that had yet to cool down and glaring green mucus could be seen everywhere, turning that place into a land of death that no life could approach. Finally, after fighting bitterly for 27 hours, the two participants felt a wave of exhaustion. They had no choice but to stop fighting and split up to heal their wounds. After all, the two of them only wanted to determine a victor, not a life and death battle. Therefore, there was no need to force the other party too much. Moreover, Their own strength had been severely reduced, and they might not be able to withstand the opponent's sudden counterattack. Therefore, it was best to stop while they were ahead and restore their strength to a safe level. If a bloodbath was a direct battle, then what the two of them needed to compete would be their respective recovery abilities. Whoever recovered faster would be able to seize the initiative in the next battle. Whoever recovered slower would lack the confidence and capital to fight, and could only be suppressed by the other side. However, even during the recovery period, it was impossible for either side to let the other recover their strength so easily. Grim casually opened a flame gate and summoned hundreds of flaming creatures from the fire elemental plane. The creatures pounced on Senazar, who was still struggling to heal herself 1,000 meters away. During the battle, Grim did not summon a flame gate even once. The reason was simple. The flaming creatures he summoned were too weak and could not interfere in a battle between Tier 3 wizards. If he had the time and energy to summon a flame gate, he might as well use a berserk fireball instead. That way, he might be able to deal more damage to his opponent. However, since Senazar was in the recovery period, the advantage of the flame gate's ability to continuously summon flaming creatures could be seen. Grim did not expect these flaming creatures to hurt Senazar. He only hoped that they could more or less interfere with her recovery. After hesitating for a moment, Grim took out a puppet amulet and summoned an elemental magic equipment, urging it to charge at Senazar. After all, the elemental magic equipment had appeared many times, and it was almost impossible to hide it from others. Therefore, Grim took advantage of the fact that both sides were at their weakest to summon it. How could Senazar not be on guard against Grim's signature grade 3 elemental magic equipment? When she saw the huge metal elemental magic equipment rising from the ground, a sinister sneer appeared on her face. "I've been waiting for you," Senazar muttered softly. She lowered her head and took out a gray wooden pot from her pouch. She threw it at the elemental magic equipment that was charging at her. The wooden pot was only the size of a normal person's palm. It was unremarkable, and there did not seem to be any defensive spells on it. Therefore, it was no surprise that it shattered in front of the elemental magic equipment. The wooden pot shattered, and blue liquid splattered all over the ground. A strange golden pea that was soaked in the liquid naturally fell at the feet of the elemental magic equipment. The moment the golden pea touched the soil, the round and flat pods let out a cheer. The 6 tiny leaves at the bottom curled up into a sawtooth shape, firmly holding it in place. Unknowingly, the roots of the leaves had already pierced into the soil like sharp swords and began to rapidly drill into the soil. Golden pea, the AI chip in Grim's mind only took 1,000th of a second to retrieve information related to the golden pea and quickly sent it over. Grim scanned through all the information in an instant, and his expression immediately changed. "Destroy it. Don't let it take root," Grim roared at the elemental magic equipment. Actually, there was no need for him to roar. After receiving the warning from Grim, the elemental magic equipment had already lifted its thick metal legs and stomped down on the golden pea. Unfortunately, it was too late. With an earth-shattering boom, the ground beneath the elemental magic equipment split open. A green plant with a diameter of 5 meters rose from the ground, wrapping around the elemental magic equipment and forcibly rising into the sky. It was like an endless ladder to heaven. The green plant grew endlessly, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the clouds along with the elemental magic equipment. In front of Grim's eyes, the thick root of the plant. Damn it, it really is a magic pod. Grim looked at the thick root that was still growing at a crazy speed and could not help but curse in a low voice. Due to the rapid growth of the magic pod, one could even hear the whistling of the wind when they were close. This magic pod was a kind of magical creation, but it was also a kind of strange magic. Soaked in the fountain of regeneration, once it left the wooden pot, it would grow at a crazy speed, sweeping away everything within 10 meters of it. Seriously speaking, it did not have any offensive power. It was just that it accidentally swept away the elemental magic equipment as it grew. However, at certain times, it could have an effect similar to a banishing spell or a binding spell. Of course, most of the time, the wizards who nurtured it used it to save their lives. At least, among most of the spells that Grimm knew of, there was no one that could transfer the caster hundreds of kilometers away in an instant. However, nurturing a magic pod required a lot of Fountain of Regeneration, which was a little too expensive. Although a magic pod like this could not grow forever, the moment it exploded with the vitality it had accumulated for decades, even a grade 3 wizard like Grimm would have a hard time completely destroying it. Moreover, in just a few moments, the magic pod had already extended hundreds of kilometers away. Even if Grimm expended a lot of effort to destroy it, he would not be able to pull the elemental magic equipment back. This also meant that the elemental magic equipment would not be able to be used in the upcoming battle. Damn, such a good life-saving method was only used to cancel out his elemental magic equipment. Facing such an extravagant method, facing a bloodline sorcerer who was willing to pay a high price to get rid of the elemental magic equipment, Grimm could only curse in his heart. There was nothing he could do. After surviving for only 7 seconds, the short life of the magic pod came to an end. The sound of burning paper rang out, and the enormous body of the demonic pod was instantly incinerated into ashes, leaving behind only a deep pit in the field and a cloud of ashes that filled the sky. As for the elemental magic equipment, it had already disappeared without a trace. It might have fallen somewhere hundreds of kilometers away. Cough. Grimm could not help but sigh inwardly. As he walked step by step towards the peak, everything he had was no longer a secret. He had become the object of research for tens of thousands of wizards. Those who dared to participate in the battle between the strong would probably have all kinds of strange methods to deal with Grimm, waiting for him to make the first move. What about his plague-poisoned spirit, Remy? As soon as Grimm released Remy, Senazar, who was far away, took out an ancient scroll from her bosom. The scroll was overflowing with magic fluctuations. Spirit Sealing, a rank 3 spell scroll. It could temporarily seal a magical creature with a spiritual body and imprison it in a different dimension. The scroll was a rank 3 spell scroll, so it would not be a problem to deal with Remy, who was only at the beginning of rank 3. Grimm's face stiffened, and he could only let Remy turn back into a rune and attach it to his body. What should he do next? Summon the Thunder Dragon? However, Grimm did not need to verify this idea. After all, summoning a creature from a different dimension was also a type of spell. If his opponent was prepared, a simple banish wand would be enough to make the Thunder Dragon arms return empty-handed. At that time, he would have to pay a large amount of spiritual force and spell energy. It would not be worth it. Chapter 1039. The Grimm of today was different from the past. In the past, he was low-key and reserved. Every time he revealed his strange abilities, he would always surprise his enemies. But now, step by step, he had reached the pinnacle of the sorcerer world, and his strange abilities were widely spread, becoming a household name. At this moment, the enemies who dared to appear in front of him were either strong or well-prepared, possessing various spells that could restrain his main combat power. Hence, every battle from now on, Grimm's battles were fierce and torturous. The main reason for this was that the high-grade sorcerers who could reach their current level through the cruel and intense sorcerer system were not good people. They had similar encounters with Grimm. Every high-grade sorcerer had more or less hidden secrets that outsiders didn't know about. Take Senazar, for example. She was discovered to have talent as a sorcerer at the age of 7 and was immediately sent to the Sorcerer Tower. She became a prospective sorcerer at the age of 9 and successfully became a sorcerer at the age of 11. Her journey had been smooth sailing, and she had become the envy of many of her friends and companions. At that time, Panwood Academy, which Senazar had entered, was a small sorcerer organization. The most powerful person in the organization was only a grade 2 sorcerer. Suddenly, a disciple with amazing talent like Senazar was selected. Naturally, the sorcerer school was overjoyed and nurtured with all their might. Moreover, Senazar was not only talented, but she was also very beautiful. Hence, she became a goddess that many young sorcerers chased after. Panmu Academy was a relatively secluded, small organization, hidden in the ruins of an ancient city that no one knew about. Normally, they rarely communicated with the outside world. However, such a peaceful and ordinary sorcerer organization suddenly experienced a drastic change. In a single night, the entire sorcerer organization's 7 official sorcerers and 36 apprentices all died, turning into puddles of stinking venom. Meanwhile, Xanazar, the only survivor, had become deranged, and his level had strangely risen to Tier 2. Although this was not a big deal, it shocked the scattered Tower Forest Association at that time. Thus, the investigation team, led by Elder Salubo, hurried to the ruins of the academy. After a series of secret investigations, they came to a conclusion. The culprit behind the destruction of Palwood Academy should be the Grade 2 Dean. He coveted Sanaz's beauty and talent, so he wanted to keep her as his, but unfortunately, she resisted fiercely. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, the Grade 2 Magus had no choice but to go all out. He used the cruelest witchcraft to transform Sanazar into an ugly yet powerful poison wyvern. However, something seemed to have gone wrong during the process of implanting the control runes. Sanazar, who had suddenly regained his self-awareness, went berserk and used his newly acquired poison dragon bloodline to kill all the magi and acolytes in the academy. As a pitiful victim, Sanazar's crime was naturally forgiven. At the same time, the Tier 4 sorcerer Salubo, who was in charge of investigating this matter, took pity on the young man's talent and took advantage of the situation to recruit him into his family. Now, Sanazar had grown into a powerful Grade 3 Magus, becoming the pillar of support for the Salubo family and controlling all the affairs of the family. These early experiences had greatly affected her temperament, causing her to become irritable and impulsive, vicious and cruel. However, what she found most unbearable was the terrifying destruction that the poison wyvern bloodline had on her appearance. After all, a human's body of flesh and blood was too weak, and it was difficult for it to withstand the corrosion and transformation of the innate poison. This was why Sanazar, who had once been a beautiful magus, always covered her body in purple mist all year round to prevent others from seeing her frighteningly ugly body and appearance. Every time she transformed into a poison wyvern, it was a huge torture for her, and she would recall a terrible past that she could not bear to look back on. Hence, after transforming into a poison wyvern, Sanazar became exceptionally crazy and tyrannical, and her battle prowess was extraordinary. The magic tools she had chosen for herself were also very specific. They were the Amulet of the Furious Heart and the Armor of Thorns. The former could increase her basic physical combat strength by 30% and transform her claws and fangs into enchanted artifacts of the same grade, but at the cost of having her intelligence. The latter could condense a layer of thorn armor on the surface of her body, and all enemies who attacked her would have to take 15% of their own damage. Fortunately, this thorn armor could only reflect fire damage from Grim, and not holy damage, which could ignore defense. Otherwise, Grim would have long since fallen to Sanazar and himself. After all, Grim was only immune to low-level fire elemental damage, not light elemental damage. On the other hand, Grim's performance left a deep impression on Sanazar. Despite being an elemental sorcerer, he was able to fight a bloodline sorcerer to a standstill in close combat. This fully displayed Grim's frightening physique. If an elemental sorcerer had a strong physique comparable to a physique refinery sorcerer or a bloodline sorcerer, coupled with his frightening elemental sorcery, just how powerful could such a sorcerer be? Now that the battle had reached this point, Grim no longer held back. He quickly switched from Body of Balrog to Body of Flame, no longer tangling with Sanazar in close combat, and began to bombard her from afar. Relying on the shocking movement ability of Body of Flame and the elusive Flame Leap, Grim was like a flame elf shuttling through the sea of flames, using violent and ferocious fireballs and earth-shattering flame storms to attack Senazar. With the 400 degrees of holy damage from Sodden's divine ring, each of Grimm's attacks could deal 800 to 900 degrees of damage, which was gradually approaching the attack power of a Tier 4 sorcerer. Hence, the damage he dealt to Senazar was unparalleled. The terrifying scorch marks left by the fire spells and the scorch marks left by the holy power caused Senazar's hideous body to be covered with scars. Her terrifying physique of 39 points frantically repaired her body, but she still could not withstand Grimm's crazy damage. Senazar, who had lost a lot of strength, dashed left and right amidst the bursting flames, madly chasing after Grimm's flaming body. However, she would always fall into the traps Grimm had set. She would either be smashed into the ground by the meteors falling from the sky, or hit by the scarlet pillars of flames rising into the sky. Once the veil of gentleness was removed, Grimm's wild battle prowess made every sorcerer who witnessed the battle feel gratified, but at the same time, they could not help but feel apprehensive. Crushing. A powerful crushing. Grimm relied on his highly mobile body of flame to dodge his opponent's close-range attacks, and then used the same ferocious fire spells to drown his opponent in waves of flames. No matter how the venom wyvern Senazar struggled, she could not break free from the violent flames that chased after her like a shadow. She could only roar furiously as she rushed from one sea of fire to another. Everywhere she could see, there were ferocious, boiling flames everywhere. If not for the venom wyvern's bloodline, giving Senazar a strong body and shockingly high resistance to magic, she would have long since turned into a puff of ashes under the ferocious fire spells. But even after suffering such a miserable blow, Senazar did not want to admit defeat and continued to struggle in the sea of fire, chasing after the dazzling human figure made of bright yellow flames. A layer of flesh and blood on the surface of her body fell off after being burnt, and another layer quickly grew out from underneath. Relying on her terrifying regenerative ability and the deep power of her bloodline, Senazar withstood Grimm's most ferocious attacks. Even though she was on the verge of collapsing, she still stood firm. Now, it all depended on which of the two was more ferocious and could last longer. If Senazar's body was stronger and she could exhaust Grimm's mental strength and spell power, she would naturally be the winner of today's battle. But if Grimm's fire spells were more ferocious and Senazar's bloodline power was exhausted, she would not be Grimm's match. Without the support of the Venom Wyvern bloodline, Senazar would not be Grimm's match. Hence, on the third day after entering the Blue Sea realm, both sides quickly entered into a battle of attrition, starting an unprecedented battle of the pinnacle. The Venom Wyvern had 39 points of vitality, vs. the Flame Giant had 39 points of mental strength. War was not supposed to be like this. With the cautiousness of a Tier 3 sorcerer and the variety of sorcery methods, this battle should have been long and full of countless schemes and traps. Under a certain someone's forceful push, the battle did not unfold according to the usual routine from start to finish. Instead, it went astray with sparks flying everywhere. Regardless of whether this battle was to the spectators' liking, Grimm was still resolute in carrying out his plan. If he were to use the elemental sorcerer style to fight Senazar, the other party would definitely fight while moving, dragging the battle into a long and relaxed confrontation and probing. If that happened, it would be extremely difficult for Grimm to end the battle in a short period of time. Now, Senazar, who had lost most of her stamina, could no longer escape the range of Grimm's fire spells. She could only passively endure the ferocious fire attacks. As such, Senazar roared and struggled fiercely under the violent and ferocious fire attacks. Rings of poison even engulfed every inch of the ground around her. Unfortunately, she had already fallen into Grimm's rhythm. Apart from struggling futilely, there was nothing she could do to change her situation. Finally, amidst the surging waves of flames, the Venom Wyvern raised its neck and let out a long hiss. A dense purple mist burst out of its body, and it began to uncontrollably return to its human form. Chapter 1040. Senazar had been defeated. Countless magi who witnessed this scene could not help but let out a long and profound sigh. It was not that Senazar was not strong enough, but her enemy was stronger than her. She had the body of a bloodline magus and the terrifying attack power of an elemental magus. Anyone who met her would have a headache. Grim had already retracted his body of flames and returned to his human form. He looked around at the horrifying scene that resembled an abyss of purgatory and finally walked towards the charred body lying in the middle of the lava field. Senazar had also retracted her venomous WYRM form and returned to her human form. Without the cover of the purple mist, her body was strangely thin and haggard, and the surface of her body was full of scorch marks from the raging flames. One could barely make out the beautiful outline of her face, but now all that was left were pockmarked scars and pustules filled with disgusting mucus. Bloodline magi were not real monsters after all. They might be able to use their bloodline to revert to its ancient form or purify it, allowing them to be as powerful monsters for a short period of time. However, once the power of their bloodline was exhausted, they would return to their original form, revealing their weak and pitiful side. Even with Senazar's great strength as a venomous WYRM, it took her 3 days and 3 nights to exhaust all of her bloodline power. This was a testament to her talent as a bloodline magus. If she had not fought so fiercely and left the battlefield in time to give herself time to recover her bloodline power, she might have had a chance of winning. At least, if Grim wanted to win, he would have had to pay a higher price. However, Senazar's tyrannical and impulsive personality had harmed her, and she had paid a heavy price for it. Senazar struggled to prop himself up from the ground. The charred surface of his body trembled slightly, and countless ashes fell off in a rustling manner, revealing the red and white flesh underneath that was still steaming hot. Good, very good. Senazar's face revealed a terrifying smile that was uglier than a ghost's. Ignoring the injuries on his body, he angrily said, "I didn't think that there would be a time when I would make an error of judgment. I was actually defeated by a guy I looked down upon. All right, this belongs to you now." After struggling to finish his sentence, a strange black crystal flew out of the charred corpse and floated in front of Grim, rotating slowly. As soon as Grim took out the other black crystal, the 2 crystals fused together in a strange manner. Then, a dense, transparent ripple appeared. Without a sound, Grim disappeared along with the strange crystal that he had fused with. After Grim teleported away, a strange figure in a black robe appeared at the side of the field. He slowly walked to the side of Senazar, who was on the verge of death. He bent down to check her injuries, sighed softly, picked her up, turned around, and disappeared. The destination of the teleportation crystal was obviously Kothrin Castle. When Grim stepped out of the teleportation circle with a murderous aura, the person waiting for him was naturally the familiar wizard, Lauren. Before they could speak, the teleportation formation behind Grim trembled slightly, and a black-robed magus walked out with Senazar in his arms. At this point, Senazar had already fainted, so they could avoid the awkwardness of meeting each other again. Seeing the latter, Lauren, who was full of smiles, quickly bowed. "Greetings, Elder Nicholas." The black-robed magus ignored Lauren. Under the shadow of the hood, his eyes emitted a dazzling light as he stared coldly at Grim. "Good? Very good. This is the toy you left behind. Take it back." The black-robed magus Nicholas casually threw a palm-sized metal doll. There were strange red lines all over it. Holding it in his hand, Grim was shocked to find that it was the elemental magic equipment he had left behind in the blue seaplane. However, the elemental magic equipment that was originally a few meters tall and weighed tens of tons had now become a miniature metal toy. This huge change was hard for him to accept. As for the strange red lines on the outside of the model, it was obviously a special sealing spell. Without studying it carefully, Grim did not dare to break it. After tossing the magic equipment to Grim, the black-robed elder Nicholas carried Senazar and left on his own. After the figure of the other party had completely disappeared, Grim turned his gaze to Magus Lauren. Seeing Grim's puzzled gaze, Lauren explained with a bitter smile. Back then, when Elder Salubo was still in the association, he had helped Elder Nicholas quite a bit. At that time, Elder Nicholas was still a rank 1 Magus. Grim nodded in understanding. The association had existed for tens of thousands of years, and the relationships within it were complicated. It was not something an outsider like him could understand in such a short time. Therefore, after putting away the elemental magic equipment, Grim exchanged a few words with Lauren and left apologetically. Lauren sent him all the way to the entrance of the residence on the upper floor of the castle. Before they parted, he sighed meaningfully. I originally thought that you had a chance of winning, but I never thought that you would win by such a large margin. Cough. In the future, I might even have to trouble you to take care of me. All right, now that you have 12 days of rest, make good use of it. After saying this, Lauren turned around and left, full of emotions. Grim closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. He no longer bothered about whether there was any deeper meaning in Lauren's words, and turned around to enter the residence. Just as he stepped into the residence, he bumped into a few beautiful faces that were flushed red. Congratulations, congratulations. Minter, you really are the best. Congratulations, Lord Patriarch. The first to greet him were naturally Mary, Winley, and Amelia. Behind them, there were 7 or 8 unfamiliar magi of both genders standing with smiles on their faces. They had naturally chosen to rely on the Crimson family and other small magi organizations during this period of time. Although the association had set the Crimson family's sphere of influence in the Alobes region, with their powerful family strength and huge influence, the Crimson family had quite a bit of influence in the surrounding regions. The ones who had helped the Crimson family expand their influence were these small and medium-sized magi families or organizations. They did not have the ability or strength to speak in their own regions, so they could only rely on the Crimson family and borrow their strength to carry out their will. Any Magus family or organization that wanted to start a war with them or fight for resources had to consider the intentions of the Crimson family behind them. Once they provoked the Crimson family's interference, even those mid-sized organizations with rank 3 magi would not be able to bear the consequences. They could easily lose their territory and resources at the slightest provocation. It had to be said that these families had been able to rely on Grim before he had participated in the Battle of the Strong. They were crazy and ferocious enough to stake everything on a single throw. Once they made the wrong bet, it was not something that could be made up for with just a few resources. It was very likely that they would end up like the Crimson family, being uprooted from the central continent and chased out of the Scattered Towers. Hence, when they saw Grim's spectacular performance in the first battle, the leaders of the families and organizations all relaxed a little. Their faces naturally overflowed with smiles that came from the bottom of their hearts. If Grim really won the Battle of the Strong and became a rank 4 Magus, then the Magi organizations in front of them would obtain 100 times the value of their previous bet. More importantly, the Magi organizations they represented would also be able to rise by 1 or 2 ranks in their respective regions, becoming the core forces that had the right to speak. This was what they valued the most. Grim first greeted the 3 ladies, then nodded to the representatives of the organizations that had been waiting here for a long time. After chatting for a while, the sorcerers took the opportunity to leave. After going through such a cruel battle, Grim urgently needed to recover and heal. Hence, after the outsiders left, Grim calmly laid down on a stone bed and watched the battle of another group of magi on the screen. The 3 ladies surrounded him, helping him take off his outer robe and carefully treating the countless terrifying injuries on his body. Although Grim had won the battle against Sinazar easily, he had also suffered a huge blow. The continuous 3 days of crazy battles had left many hidden injuries in his body. He did not have the time or opportunity to deal with them, but now was the time to remove them one by one. Otherwise, the accumulation of hidden injuries would sooner or later break through the limits of Grim's body, and he would face the danger of his body collapsing. Now that he had the help of the three ladies, he naturally did not have to worry about these small matters anymore. He could focus all his attention on analyzing and summarizing the battle of the other side. On a vast grassland that stretched as far as the eye could see, the battle between broken-faced Jia Luo and psychic Dante was still in full swing. The psychic wizard Dante had three powerful wizard weapons. One of them was the Wraith Wand, which could be said to have played an important role in successfully summoning all kinds of powerful spirits from another world. Generally speaking, although the spirits he summoned were not very powerful, they all had terrifying abilities that ordinary people could not imagine. If ordinary magi were not careful, they would be possessed or their minds controlled. When that happened, Dante could decide whether they would live or die. However, Dante's opponent, broken-faced Jia Luo, also seemed to have the body of an undead, so he was basically immune to charm and mind witchcraft. Therefore, the terrifying spirits that were filled with extreme resentment towards the living could only attack him with terrifying screams that could tear through the clouds or soul touch that could ignore defenses. Chapter 1041. The greatsword used by face-smashing Garo was quite powerful, far more powerful than an ordinary grade 3 wizard tool. After witnessing the battle between him and Dante, Grimm even suspected that it was also a grade 4 wizard tool. The special effect of the spell was Devour. Everything that it touched, no matter if it was real or incorporeal, would instantly disappear. If it was the flesh of a living creature, it would not be able to regenerate through natural recovery, at least not during a battle. Such a special effect was obviously extremely effective against those body refinery wizards or bloodline wizards who specialized in high vitality. When their strong bodies were swallowed by the magic sword again and again, they would be reduced to skeletons. No matter how powerful their combat skills were, they would not be able to use them because they had lost their host. The necromancer Dante was at a disadvantage in this aspect. After 2 high-level spirits were swallowed by the magic sword, he lost the ability to confront the opponent head-on. He could only desperately change the battlefield, using the length of the battlefield to offset the opponent's unstoppable and violent attacks. Here was where face-smashing Garo's weakness lay: 39 points of strength and 34 points of vitality. These terrifying figures gave him unimaginable violent strength and an almost indestructible body. His every move would bring about a violent wave that could destroy the world. Ordinary grade 3 wizards would not be able to fight him head-on. However, his short legs were still a huge flaw that face-smashing Garo could not make up for. In fact, 17 points of dexterity was enough to transform him into a swordsman who was as light as a swallow and as fast as flying. Unfortunately, in front of an elemental wizard who had mastered a large number of mobility spells, this little bit of dexterity was really nothing. No matter how strong he was, no matter how evil the magic sword was, it would only be effective if it hit the enemy. When the psychic wizard Dante decided to fight a guerrilla war with him, face-smashing Garo's weakness was undoubtedly exposed. He chased after Dante for 3 days and 3 nights without rest, but Dante just avoided him and kept sending all kinds of spirits, voodoo dolls, ghost puppets, and other evil creatures to harass him. These evil creatures could not hurt Garo, but they annoyed him to no end. Once Facebreaker Galar was attacked and possessed by an evil being, Dante would instantly switch back and use the Necklace of Death that could activate the Finger of Death and the evil ceremony that raised countless ghosts and resentful spirits to attack the other party. Almost all of these attacks targeted Face, shattering Jia lose soul consciousness and did not touch his physical body. Therefore, even with Jia Lu's super high strength and super strong physique, he could do nothing about it. He could only compete with the toughness of his soul. This was the danger of a battle between high-ranked magi. Even though they had been fighting for a long time and neither side was able to do anything to the other, as long as the enemy seized an opportunity to break through their defenses, they could be annihilated at any moment. The attack of a high-grade magus was not easy to withstand. The enemies attacked by the ghosts and resentful souls raised by Dante seemed to be intact on the surface, but their souls, which are the most important, were riddled with holes. Without a long period of repair and recovery, it was almost impossible for them to recover. And this was actually the main reason why the psychic wizard Dante had made a name for himself. Moving freely on the vast prairie, Dante constantly released evil beings to harass Jia Lu while releasing many low-level ghosts in all directions. On one hand, these ghosts could find living creatures to devour to replenish Dante's mental energy. On the other hand, when Dante faced a life-threatening situation, he could quickly switch places with a ghost in the distance and avoid Jia Lu's deadly attacks. As for Facebreaker Gaylor, his strength was clearly far above Dante's, but he could not catch up to Dante because his legs were too short. Therefore, he could only grit his teeth and endure Dante's unscrupulous evil attacks. The two of them collided wantonly on the vast prairie. Everywhere they passed, all living creatures died and became Dante's blood food to replenish his energy. This included a very unfortunate large nomadic tribe that was in the path of the two of them. This nomadic tribe was large enough with thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of cows, sheep, and horses. Unfortunately, as Dante and Jia Lu passed through the center of the tribe, this native nomadic tribe that was famous throughout the prairie was instantly destroyed. Although the association had intentionally arranged for the few Tier 3 wizards to fight in some sparsely populated areas to prevent the native tribes from being affected by the aftermath of the witchcraft. However, the battle between Facebreaker Gaylor and the psychic wizard Dante still caused irreparable damage to the prairie. One had to know that a casual swing of Facebreaker Gaylor's sword contained a combination of violent force and witchcraft energy. It could easily leave a violent sword scar that stretched for hundreds of meters on the prairie. Wherever the psychic wizard Dante's ghost army passed, humans and animals would perish, and life would cease to exist. As for the place where the two peak level 3 wizards clashed, rich energy particles would be left behind, slowly infiltrating and changing the local topography and the balance of elemental energy in another way. The place where the two Tier 3 sorcerers had fought had basically become a land of death. Not only was life extinguished, but for a long time after the battle, this place would also become a dead space that no life could set foot in. After all, not every creature could withstand the excessive energy particle radiation. Grim lay on the stone bed, enjoying the service and treatment of the 3 beautiful witches, while silently collecting information on Facebreaker Gaylor's battle. On the hundreds of strange light screens in front of him, almost 80% of them were locked on a broken-faced Jia Lu. They were observing his every move from all angles and directions. As for the psychic wizard Dante's battle posture, it only occupied 20% of the screen. He was even pushed to the corner of the light screen, and it was obvious that he was not being taken seriously. This undoubtedly aroused Mary's doubts. I see that you seem to pay more attention to that Facebreaker Gaylor. Are you sure he's your next opponent? Of course. Grim tilted his head and allowed Winley to stuff a peeled pirate fruit into his mouth. Grim smiled as he savored the fragrant and delicious fruit flesh exploding in his mouth and replied nonchalantly, Why do I feel that Dante is more reliable? That Facebreaker Gaylor can't catch up to him, and he still has an entire ghost army to absorb life force and spiritual force for him. He's already in an invincible position. Once that Facebreaker Gaylor runs out of energy, I'm afraid that Ghost Spirit Brat will seize the opportunity to counterattack. What you said is also true, but the premise is that Facebreaker Gaylor doesn't have the ability to force his opponent to fight him head-on. Does he? Not only does he definitely does. Grim raised his eyebrows. You don't think that the number 1 Facebreaker Gaylor only has this much ability, do you? He can't have gotten his reputation by bullying those with shorter legs. Hearing Grim's humorous words, Amelia, who was concentrating on treating him, could not help but burst into laughter. Then he cried out in pain. It was obvious that he had been punished by Mary. The current Amelia was very different from before. After becoming a Grade 2 wizard, her body had also undergone earth-shattering changes. Above the waist, she still maintained her human form, with a slender figure and curves. She still looked like a great beauty. However, the parts below her waist split into countless strange rattan-like tentacles of varying thickness, which could move and wrap around objects at will according to her will. She was currently lying next to Grim, using her sharp fingernails smeared with bright red cardamom to cut open his skin and flesh. With agile and precise movements, she forced out the foreign energy or toxins hidden in his flesh, tendons, and bones, and then neutralized them with gentle green plant energy. Next to her was an open small wooden box filled with all kinds of small metal instruments of all shapes and sizes. It was obvious that they were used for surgical dissection. Amelia held 2 extremely sharp scalpels in her hands, and there were more than 10 different surgical instruments wrapped around her body. She did not need to look up or turn around to quickly change the operation plan. If she found a piece of flesh that was completely dead, she would remove it with the smallest wound, and then casually cast rejuvenation or life bloom on the wound. Using plant energy to stimulate Grim's body's recovery ability, the wound quickly wriggled and healed. The broken ribs needed to be reset, the necrotic flesh needed to be removed, the hidden energy needed to be neutralized, the latent toxins needed to be dispelled, and the damaged organs needed to be repaired. Even with Grim's physique, it would take him more than 10 days to fully recover, even with the help of many healing potions and purification potions. However, with Amelia's full power, Grim did not even need to move a finger. Soon, all the sequelae from the previous battle were healed. When all the work was done, Amelia let out a long sigh of relief. She used rattan to put the medical instruments back into the small wooden box and straightened her back. She asked curiously, "Master, you haven't answered Lady Mary's question just now. Why do you think so highly of Broken Face Galar?" Because Broken Face Galar's energy reserve is still above 89%, while Dante's energy reserve has dropped to 73%. Grim did not seem to care about the cuts on his body. He smiled and explained, "I think that Broken Face Galar is waiting for his energy reserve to drop to a certain threshold before finishing him off once and for all." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Broken Face Galar had chased Dante for 4 days and 4 nights, leaving terrifying, crisscrossing sword marks all over the prairie. How could he still have 89% energy reserve? This was unbelievable. Also, how did the Master know so clearly? However, she immediately understood that the Patriarch wouldn't explain any further. After all, this involved the deep secrets of high-grade wizards. Even the closest people would not easily reveal it. Grade 3 wizards who could participate in a battle between the strong were all monsters. Chapter 1042. The battle between face-smashed Garo and the psychic Dante lasted for 13 days before it came to an end. The winner of the battle was naturally the more powerful face-smashed Garo. When he teleported back from the Blue Sea realm covered in smoke, he immediately learned of the result of the other battle from his companions. To be honest, Garo was not surprised that Grim could win. However, it only took him 3 days to defeat Sinazar, who was second only to him. This kind of strength was beyond his expectations. He hurried back to the station and let the healers of his clan quickly treat his body while he quickly browsed through the entire process of Grim's battle. After reading it, Garo was silent for a long time. Although his basic strength was higher than his opponent's, this advantage was not enough for him to secure victory. Therefore, if he wanted to win the next battle, the only way was according to the rules of the association. The first battle was scheduled for 15 days. Therefore, there were only 2 days left for Face Smash Garo to rest, replenish, and adjust his equipment. This time was only enough for him to first recover his wounded body. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Soon, it was time for the 2 victors of the first battle to fight for the title of the strongest. Blue Sea Realm. As soon as the familiar light of teleportation faded, Grim regained his senses and quickly summoned Plague Poison Remy. His current location was not the sea of trees from last time, nor was it a boundless prairie. Instead, it was a stretch of rolling hills and highlands. Standing on a small hill and looking around, he could see lush green grass and yellow and green wheat fields in the distance. On the distant horizon, a pale yellow windmill was slowly turning, and there were crooked scarecrows in the wheat fields. Go, Remy. You have 10 days. 10 days later, I hope to see you bring back a strong enough army to defeat the strong enemy for me. Go. Grim ordered with a solemn expression. The Plague Poison Remy, who was only a meter tall, responded in a deep voice and immediately turned around and flew into the distance. There, smoke could be seen rising in the distance. There should be a human village. After sending Remy off, Grim took out the teleportation crystal and looked at it. His opponent, Broken Face Galer, should be to the northwest, deep in the highlands. Unlike the first time, Surefong did not approach his opponent quickly. Instead, he took out an elemental puppet and threw it on the ground, summoning a Tier 2 wind dragon. This wind dragon was one of his early creations. Unfortunately, as his strength increased, the Tier 2 magic centipede had gradually lost its chance to appear on the stage. But today, he didn't summon the wind dragon to fight, but to escape. Striding up, Grim found a seat on the wind dragon's broad and flat back. He whistled and the wind dragon flapped its light green wings. Its entire body turned into a streak of green-gray light and instantly soared into the sky, flying towards the southeast direction. 2 hours later, face-shattering Garo arrived riding an unusually spirited nightmare beast. Reining in his mount, Broken Face Garo looked around and sniffed a few times. In the end, he couldn't help but frown. Two strange energies had parted ways here. One of them was filled with the disgusting smell of voodoo poison, while the other had left through the sky, filled with an extremely dense aura of the wind element. Of course, the teleportation crystal also pointed to the direction of the wind element. Judging from this, Grim must have summoned a wind element mount and left, and the direction he left in happened to be the opposite of where he came from. He was running away from the battlefield. This seemed to be the complete opposite of the way he fought in the first battle. Face-smashing Jaluo was confused by Grim's actions. He could only pat the incubus beast beneath him, allowing it to raise its 4 hooves and chase after Grim. The nightmare beast was a strange creature that originated from the Abyss Plane. In terms of lineage, it was also a member of the many demonic creatures. Broken Face Garo had chosen the nightmare beast among the many wizard beast mounts, and the only reason was that it was eye-catching enough. The nightmare beast had a tall and mighty black and red body, a spiral sharp horn in front of its head, for hooves burning with cold flames, a pair of eyes, a ponytail, and a nose that spat out sparks of fire. The nightmare beast looked similar to a demonized unicorn, and its lineage was the complete opposite. The unicorn belonged to the sacred lineage, while the nightmare beast belonged to the demonic lineage. When a nightmare beast stepped lightly on the ground and appeared in front of others, its 4 hooves burning with the fierce flames of the abyss would leave a trail of fire behind it. Looking from afar, the black and red nightmare beast was like a dreadful demon beast that had emerged from a dream. Riding on it was simply cool to the extreme. Face-smashing Garo rode the nightmare beast as it sped across the land, leaving behind a broken trail of burning cold flames. After chasing for a day and a night, he finally found Grim on top of a high cliff. Grim stood quietly at the top of the cliff, the strange flying dragon whose flesh and bones were formed by a violent whirlpool lying beside him. Seeing Broken Face Garo galloping over, Grim cast a faint smile at them from afar. "This is the battlefield you chose for yourself." Broken Face Garo looked around and said sternly, "With our strength, no battlefield can give us too much of an advantage. If we want to win, we have to rely on our own abilities. You." Before Jia Lu could finish his words, Grim waved his hand at him. "Goodbye." After saying this, he mounted the wind dragon and soared into the sky, escaping into the distance without hesitation. "Stay here. Face-smashing Jia Luo did not expect the other party to escape, and he hurriedly drew his sword. Incomparably berserk strength mixed with copious wizard energy converged to form a majestic and terrifying sword aura, instantly engulfing the cliff. A huge pillar of dust and mud soared into the sky, accompanied by the rumbling of boulders collapsing and the rolling airwaves that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The huge cliff, which was 40 to 50 meters high, collapsed with a loud bang under Jia Luo's violent attack, blocking his path forward. Meanwhile, a strange shield made of static flames rose around Grim, blocking the splashing gravel and dust. He flew all the way to the end of the horizon with a long roar. One ran on the ground, while the other flew in the sky. The difference in speed between the two was obviously difficult to make up for. Hence, when Garo urged the nightmare beast to rush out of the pillar of dust, Grim and the wind dragon had already become a small dot on the horizon that was hard to see with the naked eye. The muscles on broken face Garo's face were completely stiff, or else he would be gnashing his teeth and veins would be bulging. Escape. Where to? In this battle, the two of them had to determine a victor. Did that guy think he could win by running away? With a heart full of anger, Broken Face Garo could only urge the nightmare beast to follow the traces of his opponent's aura. This chase lasted for 10 whole days. During these 10 days, Facebreaker Jia Luo had been tracking Grim day and night, and the two of them would bump into each other every 500 kilometers. In the beginning, Grim would greet his opponent, but when his opponent's anger was completely ignited, he would simply run away. As long as Broken Face Garo's aura appeared in his field of vision, he would escape without hesitation, not even giving his opponent a chance to greet him. After 10 days of chasing and fleeing, Broken Face Garo's anger gradually grew, and he chased for 10 days and 10 nights without stopping. Only the Nightmare Beast, with its demonic physique, could endure such torture. If it were any other wizard beast or demon cult, they would have collapsed from exhaustion. 10 days later, Broken Face Garo finally caught up to Grim. This time, Grim did not flee. Instead, he coiled up on a hill with his wind dragon, lit a bonfire, and roasted some fragrant wild boar meat. He smiled as he watched Broken Face Garo approach. Although Broken Face Garo had fantasized countless times over the past 10 days of chasing and slaughtering his opponent, when his opponent did not run away today, a trace of doubt arose in his heart, and he became more cautious. After chasing for 10 days and 10 nights without rest, an ordinary person would have collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. But for Broken Face Garo, who had a vitality of 34 points, this was just a small warm-up. If his opponent wanted to use this to exhaust his strength, then sorry, this little trick was useless against him. As an undead, Broken Face Garo no longer knew what fatigue was. But with the shrewdness and cunning of the legendary fire wizard, how could he not know the truth of his body? Since that was the case, what was his goal in leading him around this land for 10 days and nights? Filled with countless questions, Broken Face Garo slowly approached the bonfire. 5 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles. When Broken Face Garo was less than 1,000 meters away from his opponent's camp, Grim still did not make any move to escape on his wind dragon. This made him even more puzzled. 1,000 meters was not a long distance, but it was not short either. For a grade 3 magus like Broken Face Garo, it would take him less than 10 seconds to cross such a distance. 10 seconds was not enough for Grim to escape from the range of Garo's berserk sword aura. Under Garo's urging, the nightmare beast slowly approached Grim, and the distance between them grew smaller and smaller. When Garo was less than 500 meters away from Grim, he finally confirmed that Grim had stopped running. Jia Luo slowly jumped down from the nightmare beast, leaving it behind. His tall and sturdy body swayed as he slowly walked towards the camp. Their gazes collided, and dazzling sparks flew. "Why aren't you running anymore? Aren't you very good at running? Try to escape again." The muscles on Broken Face Garo's stiff face squirmed in a strange manner, revealing a sinister expression. Grim, who was sitting steadily on the high ground, revealed a sympathetic smile and said to Broken Face Garo, The one who should be running today is not me, but you." As soon as Grim finished speaking, the strange sound of tens of thousands of beasts running came from behind the hill. Then, like a black flood, the plague army swarmed out and pounced on broken-faced Garo. Chapter 1043. The plague army was endless, advancing wave after wave. It was as if a passage to another dimension had opened up behind the highland in front of them. An endless stream of plague creatures swarmed out from both sides of the campsite, which was less than 10 meters in radius. They roared and pushed as they charged at face-shattering Garo. Their strength was only at the level of an apprentice, which was not something Garo cared about. Therefore, what made Garo's expression change was not their strength, but their numbers. Many ants could bite an elephant to death. Such a lowly thought only existed in the circle of low-level creatures, but it was unrealistic for the sorcerers, who were considered to be superior. One ant was an ant, but 10,000 ants were not ants. At the start of the battle, face-shattering Garo had indeed held such a simple thought, and the countless battles he had fought proved it. Therefore, from the beginning, he only had one mortal enemy, the legendary fire sorcerer Grim. The mutated monsters between him and Grim were covered in sticky bodily fluids and abscesses. They had sharp fangs, claws, and they could only consume his strength and stamina. He did not have the thought of using the plague army to kill him, and neither did his enemies. Amidst countless strange, twisted roars, plague beasts that looked like ghouls lunged at Ji-Hao while crawling on the ground. They bared their fangs and opened their bloody mouths, and their bodies were surrounded by faint yellow-green smoke. Whoosh! An invisible sword aura wave that was 1 meter above the ground swept in front of him, extending for 30 to 40 meters and almost overturning 80% of the space in front of face-shattering Garo. All the plague beasts that were swept by the sword aura were silently cut in half. Their upper bodies were still waving their claws and fangs, but their lower bodies had already collapsed to the ground, and their stinky, mutated organs flowed all over the ground. One strike, one effortless strike. Face-shattering Garo had casually killed nearly 100 terrifying plague beasts and chopped the pitiful creatures that had rushed up to him into a pile of flesh and blood. However, such a massacre was not enough to stop the plague beast attacks. In less than 5 seconds, the swarming plague beasts once again took over the position of their dead comrades, stepping on the sticky and disgusting flesh and blood as they madly pounced on face-shattering Garo. Whoosh with another sweep of the sword, driven by the 39 points of berserk strength. The abundant wizard energy seeped through the strange long sword in the form of ripples. Wherever they went, no one could stop them, and they were like a hot knife through butter. The plague beasts that had just arrived in front of shade-faced Jia Luo were once again shredded into pieces of flesh that flowed and piled up on the ground. Face-smashing Jia Luo only had time to take 2 steps forward before he was once again blocked by the swarm of plague beasts. This time, the huge army of plague beasts began to disperse to the sides, seemingly intending to surround him in the center. Face-crushing Jia Luo didn't show the slightest hint of fear or uneasiness in the face of the thousands of roaring plague beasts that pounced at him. Every 2 steps, he would casually wave the big sword in his hand, and an invisible but substantial ripple of sword light would spread out. All the ferocious plague beasts that came into contact with the ripple of sword light didn't even have the chance to dodge or resist. They were instantly destroyed by the berserk energy contained within the ripple, becoming a part of the mountain of corpses that piled up on the ground. Face-smashing Jia Luo was like an undead god that controlled life and death. He casually spread the terrifying aura of death as he leisurely stepped on the corpses to reach his sovereign throne. As for the plague beasts that charged at him from all directions, their bodies would suddenly be torn to pieces the moment they stepped within 30 meters of face-smashing Jia Luo, turning into a mass of flesh and blood that rolled down the mountain of corpses. The plague beasts continuously surged forward, dying one after another. This caused the mountain of corpses to rapidly widen, thicken, and stack up. Face-smashing Jia Luo's advance became slower and slower, losing the calmness and composure he had at the start of the battle. Many times, even he had to step on the smelly and sticky corpses of the plague beasts to advance. In the end, when the plague beasts had gathered to a certain number, face-smashing Jia Luo could only stop and swing his sword a few more times to clear a path for himself to advance. Countless plague beasts leaped forward. The ground and the air were filled with their leaping figures. Through the gaps between the countless overlapping bodies, face-smashing Jia Luo could vaguely see a tall and imposing figure standing high on the top of the hill, as well as a cold smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. Roar! A low roar that didn't sound like a human's could be heard. Face-smashing Jia Luo roared angrily, using all the strength in his body to swing the big sword in his hand. An unprecedentedly powerful and terrifying ripple of sword light spread out, sweeping through countless ugly and evil bodies in its path. It swept towards the figure standing calmly in the distance. With a distance of less than 500 meters, his berserk strength was enough to extend his power to the enemy's body. However, the enemy seemed to be prepared. More and more plague beasts pounced from the surroundings, using their frail and fragile bodies to block the berserk sword light. Wherever the sword light passed, flesh and blood were torn to shreds. However, the berserk power contained within was also rapidly being consumed. Finally, the dazzling and terrifying sword light cut through the last plague beast's body, sweeping through the small camp. However, just as its power was about to explode, it was crushed by an iron fist that was enveloped in a dense red glow. Elemental magic equipment. The elemental magic equipment released by Grimm stood in front of the camp, using its indestructible alloy body and equally berserk strength to crush the sword light ripple that came from afar. Face-smashing Jia Luo's expression changed drastically once again. He didn't fear a legendary fire wizard who was alone. He was even confident that he could use any opportunity to get close to him to instantly crush his opponent's body in defense. With this elemental magic equipment, the threat of the fire wizard skyrocketed, reaching a point where even he had to be careful when dealing with him. A meat shield and an elemental cannon. One such a combination could unleash berserk firepower without restraint. Even someone as conceited as face-smashing Jia Luo would have a slight headache. However, since he had chosen to fight Grimm with all his might, he had naturally come prepared. Whether it was magic equipment that could reduce fire damage, summon creatures that could deal with metal puppets like the elemental magic equipment, or reinforcements like the giant dragons from another world, face-smashing Jia Luo had prepared all sorts of countermeasures. Even if it was light elemental damage that ignored defense and magic resistance. Broken-faced Jia Lu had prepared several methods of witchcraft that had yet to be tested. However, in the current environment, he was surrounded by thousands of plague beasts, and it was difficult for him to calmly deal with the enemy's reinforcements. At this point in the battle, even though he was wielding his sword at lightning speed, it was difficult for him to keep the flood of plague beasts at a distance of more than 10 meters. The circle of plague beasts was getting smaller and smaller, closer and closer. Most of the time, face-smashing Jia Luo had no choice but to use his equally terrifying iron fist to smash the plague beasts that were charging at him into mincemeat while brandishing his sword. The pestilence beasts that were struck by face-shattering Garuda's iron fists were instantly shattered. Their bodies were crushed into mincemeat and bone fragments by the violent force, and then splattered in all directions along with the blood that covered their bodies. The violent energy contained within made every piece of flesh and every piece of bone extremely dangerous. When they shot out in all directions like a hail of bullets, the surrounding plague beasts were instantly beaten to a pulp, leaving bloody holes all over their bodies. However, even such an attack could not kill more plague beasts in an instant. These plague beasts that had countless plague viruses in their bodies dragged their battered bodies forward with all their might, not wavering in the slightest by the slaughter before them. They were not fighting at all, but sending themselves to their deaths. They were using their lives and their bodies to surround and pester the enemy. And their accomplishments were nothing more than the thick blood and mincemeat that splattered on face-smashing Jia Luo's body. As for damage, with the rank and strength of these plague beasts, they were not enough to inflict even a small wound on face-smashing Jia Luo. However, the wave of plague beasts still managed to stop face-smashing Jia Luo's advance. And when face-smashing Jia Luo was surrounded by the plague beasts, the real attack came. The elemental magic machine that had been used as a meat shield and bulldozer had now turned into a metal cannon. It wielded a magic ray cannon with a muzzle that was half a meter in diameter and used the magic furnace in its body as its energy source, furiously charging the cannon. This was a magical weapon that had been improved and adjusted by the Goblin Research Institute over 100 times. Its attack power was between magic cannons and giant magic cannons, making it more suitable for portable use. Moreover, its attack power had reached 350 degrees. This kind of attack strength sounded very ordinary, but its attack frequency was at the level of one attack every 7 seconds. One had to know that magic cannons with an average attack power of 120 degrees could only fire once every 3 seconds, while the shockingly powerful giant magic cannons could fire once every 67 seconds. In comparison, this magic ray cannon could be charged by the elemental magic machine and fire magic rays that could threaten a grade 3 sorcerer. This was already a kind of milestone leap and improvement. Moreover, the elemental magic machine was not the only thing that could threaten face-smashing Jia Luo. The main character of this unparalleled siege was the legendary fire wizard Grim. When Grim stepped on a battlefield and started using his incomparably violent fire spells to trample on face-smashing Jia Luo, this undead creature that never knew the meaning of fatigue finally retreated. He slowly retreated while desperately waving the greatsword in his hand. At the same time, he had to slash and blow up the plague beasts that were lunging at him, as well as the furious fireballs and the super-condensed rays of magic energy that were flying at him. He was so busy that he could barely move his hands and feet. Countless times, he wanted to turn around and escape from this predicament where he could not retaliate, but the plague beasts that swarmed him kept him back. Chapter 1044. Blue Sea Plain, Nero City. This was a medium-sized city with a population of no more than 60,000. As a city dominated by humans, most of the buildings in Nero City were made of wood. Although the style was different from that of the Magus world, it was still similar. It was the time of the day when the sun was the brightest. Under the warm sunlight, this small human city was filled with tourists and merchants. There was an endless stream of carriages loaded with all kinds of goods. In a tall and magnificent palace in the city center, a beautiful girl in a purple lace dress was anxiously talking to a white-robed magus. "Are you going to give up on us?" "Why, Teacher Jonah." The white-robed magus was a woman with a somewhat aged face. Her eyes were kind, and her face was full of doting and helplessness. On the chest area of her robe, there was a strange magic emblem, which was the emblem of the Taro Forest Association. Judging from the energy fluctuations on her body, she was only a grade 1 magus. "Princess Aisha, we've been getting along very well these past few years. I also like a smart and studious disciple like you. However, the association suddenly sent us an emergency evacuation message, but they didn't explain why. I can't do anything about it." The magus frowned and explained indifferently. Could it be related to the terrible plague that suddenly broke out in the north?" Princess Aisha asked in a hoarse voice. The white-robed magus was silent for a moment, then finally said, "You're not a member of the association. Logically speaking, I shouldn't reveal this information to you. Teacher, all these years, you've doted on me the most and cared about me the most. I've always loved you like a mother." Princess Aisha became even more emotional. "All right, then I'll make an exception this time." The white-robed magus gritted her teeth. "According to the information I received from the association, there will be a magus duel in the Gordon Highlands of the northern border of the duchy. Gordon Highlands? That's thousands of miles away from Nero City. Yes, I originally thought that the Magus duel wouldn't affect Nero City. Unfortunately, judging from the outbreak of the plague in the north, some powerful Magus must have used some forbidden methods. As far as I know, we've lost contact with the dozen cities in the north. It should be. At this point, the witch's voice became gloomy. Teacher, don't tell me. With you here, those magi still dare to act recklessly? Teacher Jonah, Nero City is my only fief. If this place is destroyed, I will have nothing left. Princess Aisha shook the witch's arm with all her might. Big tears rolled down her cheeks, and she looked pitiful. The white-robed witch shook her head helplessly. If I were you, Aisha, I would bring my family and subordinates to hide in the south. Wasting even a minute here was extremely dangerous. As for the association, don't count on it. Even if the higher-ups used some taboo methods, their punishment is a matter for the future. A Magus station here like me is unable to change the decision made by the higher-ups of the association. At this point, the white-robed witch's expression suddenly changed. She rushed to the tall and bright floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the sky in the north. There, in the sky above, was an inconspicuous black dot floating up and down. Remy stood nearly 1,000 meters in the sky, and beneath him was a huge mountain eagle covered in mucus and abscesses, all of its fur gone. He bent down slightly and looked at the clean and beautiful city below him, which looked like a chessboard. He looked at the dense crowd shuttling back and forth, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. With a gentle wave of his hand, large groups of black smoke emerged from his body and rushed down to the sky like a group of living creatures. As the black smoke continued to descend, they rapidly multiplied, turning from tiny spores into plague bacteria that were difficult to be seen by the naked eye. The black smoke continued to thin and thin until it completely disappeared. But in a place that was hard to see, countless poisonous bacteria floated in the air and spread to every corner of the small city with a gentle breeze. Sounds of violent coughing and vomiting could be heard everywhere in the small city, followed by the sound of furniture being knocked over. Soon, the first batch of monsters that could not withstand the plague bacteria and mutated appeared. They might have been old men with crooked backs, or young men and women with thin bodies when they were alive. But after they mutated into poison corpses, not only did their strength increase greatly, but their movements were also much more agile and nimble than before. What was even more terrifying was their huge numbers. The poison corpses that were crawling on the ground relied on their rapidly growing claws and fangs to charge through the walls and houses at a speed that far exceeded that of a normal person. Even if their heads smashed through a wooden board that was 3 fingers thick, they did not care at all. Shaking their slightly dizzy heads, they once again rushed forward. In every street and house in the small city, human screams could be heard everywhere, and poison corpses could be seen climbing and leaping at high speed. Unprepared and panicked figures were thrown to the ground by the poison corpses. In a burst of terrible screams, there was the terrible sound of wild beasts gnawing on their prey. The humans with slightly stronger bodies barely managed to resist the first wave of plague modification. This was not luck, but the beginning of an even greater torment. They coughed violently as they staggered and ran, fearfully avoiding the pursuit of the terrifying poison corpses. Poison corpses could be seen everywhere in the big city, so they were like headless flies, hiding here and there, not knowing where the real safe place was. And so, under the attack of the plague bacteria and poison corpses, the second wave of plague modification appeared. Remy hovered high above the small city, looking down at everything that was happening below him with an indifferent expression. Suddenly, he turned his head and stared coldly at the slightly luxurious and exquisite building in the center of the small city. There was a faint elemental fluctuation there. Immediately after, a female wizard in a white robe, wrapped in curling black smoke, screamed as she rushed into the sky. A wizard from the association? Remy saw the badge on the white-robed witch's chest and hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand to disperse the plague bacteria that lingered around the witch. "Are you the wizard stationed here?" Remy asked in a hoarse voice. The white-robed witch, Jonah, was still in a state of shock as she watched the black smoke around her gradually dissipate. Only then did she relax a little. Hearing the question of the monster above her, she carefully controlled the elemental particles to float herself to the side of the monster. "Greetings, I'm the wizard stationed here in the Nisla Principality. May I know who you are, sir?" As she spoke, the white-robed witch, Jonah, secretly looked down at Nero's city below her. At this very moment, the originally beautiful and peaceful little city had already become a plague and poisonous cave. Terrifying scenes that one could not bear to look at could be seen everywhere. "Since you're a wizard from the association, leave. I need to borrow some of the people here. Sir, there are a few people in the city that I want to take with me. What do you think? Are they from the association?" "No, but..." "Then leave them all behind. If you don't leave, I'll leave you behind as well." Hearing Remy's gradually impatient reply, Jonah could only shake her head and leave. Just as she turned around and left, Jonah clearly saw a group of ugly and ferocious monsters rushing out of the palace. One of the monsters even had a piece of the purple dress left on its body. The moment she turned to leave, Chiao-Na clearly saw a group of hideous monsters rushing out of the palace. One of the monsters even had a piece of the purple chiffon dress left on its body. Just as she turned around and left, Jonah clearly saw a group of ugly and ferocious monsters rushing out of the palace. One of the monsters even had a piece of the purple dress left on its body. Seeing this scene, the last trace of hesitation on Jonah's face completely disappeared. She gritted her teeth and flew away without looking back. Remy, the plague spirit of poison, saw that the plague creatures in the small city below him had gradually gathered. There, 80 kilometers away, there was another city. It was a place that he had to harvest personally. As for the 6 or 7 human towns and villages along the way, Remy would send his newly evolved plague messengers to gather the source of troops. Remy was able to build up a plague army in just 10 days by relying on the necessary nodes of accumulation, and the accumulation of a little makes a mickle. And it was because of this that he was able to build up a huge plague army in just 10 days. While the Gordon Highlands were filled with blood and flesh, and the northern part of the Nessera Principality was invaded by the plague, the Tower Forest Association far away in the Sorcerer World was in a mess. Although the Blue Sea Dimension was not considered an important resource dimension within the association, it was still a good place for leisure and vacation. Now, almost 1/5 of the territory of the largest Nessera Principality had been invaded by the plague, and all the people living there had become ugly and terrifying plague beasts. Under such circumstances, was the association going to sit back and watch the plague spirit of poison do whatever he wanted? Because of this problem, the wizards in the association were divided into many factions, and they were in a mess. Some of the more radical ones were clamoring for the association to punish the hateful fire wizard for allowing the contract spirit to slaughter and destroy the association's property. Some were more conservative, thinking that the association had arranged for the battlefield to be there. What the fire wizard did was obviously a witchcraft method, so it was pardonable. A warning after the battle and compensation of some resources was enough. There are also some who were on both sides with an ambiguous attitude. They were dissatisfied with the poison spirit's wanton actions, but they did not want to appear too petty in front of thousands of wizards. They did not want to be calculative over a little bit of damage to the otherworld's natives. Therefore, it was difficult to reconcile the opinions of the few parties, and some of them were firmly opposed. However, these were the opinions and attitudes of the low-level and mid-level wizards. Compared to them, the high-level wizards of the association were calm, as if they did not care about the temporary chaos of a small resource plane. On the contrary, some of the high-level wizards were surprised by the fire wizard's unscrupulous methods. Chapter 1045. However, no matter how complicated the situation outside was on the battlefield, it was a head-on battle to the death. It was just that the one fighting with all his might was face-shattering Jia Lu, while the legendary fire magus was at ease. Standing atop the tall mountain of corpses, terrifying poison corpses swarmed in from all directions. Although they weren't very powerful, they were like a huge wave that could topple mountains and overturn seas, trapping face-shattering Jia Lu. It was difficult for him to even take a step out. What they got in return was a merciless massacre and frenzied slaughter. The batch that rushed forward didn't even have the time to blink before rolling down the mountain of corpses amidst the ripples of sword light and the furious roars of wild beasts. The broken corpses also became a part of the mountain of corpses, making the mountain of corpses even taller and thicker. Even after slaughtering nearly 600,000 poison corpses, face-shattering Jia Lu was still as ferocious and powerful as ever. Whether it was a punch, a kick, a sword, or a roar, he could deal devastating damage to the poison corpses surrounding him. Face-shattering Jia Lu was a bloodline magus, after all. His violent strength and powerful physique came mainly from his bloodline, unlike physique refinement magi, who had trained themselves. Therefore, what physique refinement magi wanted the most was endless stamina, and what bloodline magi wanted the most was endless bloodline power. Unfortunately, there was a limit to one's strength. Most of the time, these things couldn't be changed by one's will. Seemingly having learned from Sanazar's previous lesson, face-shattering Jia Lu stopped using the violent sword techniques that consumed a lot of his bloodline power after failing to break out of the encirclement several times. Instead, he slowly whittled down the number of poison corpses with one slash at a time. Although the large-scale sword light ripples from before were much faster and more satisfying in killing the poison corpses than they were now, it still consumed a portion of his bloodline power. As an undead, face-shattering Jia Lu didn't face the problem of physical exhaustion. Therefore, if he didn't want to end up like Sanazar and lose miserably after his opponent exhausted his bloodline power, he had to cherish every strand of bloodline power. This was the only way out of his current predicament. Truth be told, this was an alien plane that no one was familiar with, and the witchcraft materials used by the plague beasts were obviously from the natives of this plane. Jia Luo didn't believe that in just 10 days, the other party could gather an endless number of natives to create this plague beast. Therefore, after giving up on the unrealistic idea of escaping quickly, face-smashing Jia Lu finally recognized reality and began to seriously make various preparations for a long-term battle. Xiao Chun tried not to use his bloodline power if he could. Instead, he slowly killed these poison corpses with his saber. Every now and then, when a number of poison corpses gathered around him was enough, he would use his berserk sword skill to instantly clear the screen and reduce their numbers. This combination of strong and weak gave enough time for the power of the bloodline to recover. Jia Luo did not believe that the abominable fire wizard could turn all the natives of the Blue Sea Plain into poison corpses. However, even if he gave up on the large-scale sword light ripples, face-smashing Jia Lu, who only relied on a strong body and combat instincts to fight, was still terrifying and powerful. It didn't matter if it was the lowest grade of poison corpses or evolved servant corpses. As long as they appeared in front of him, they would be torn into pieces with a single slash. It was impossible for them to be injured but not die. With his strength and physique, he could maintain this rate of 2 slashes per second for several months without having to worry about exhausting his bloodline power. Therefore, when Grim, who was watching the battlefield from the side, discovered that face-smashing Jia Lu's bloodline power was increasing instead of decreasing, he immediately threw himself into the battle with his elemental equipment. A large number of poison corpses wouldn't be able to exhaust your bloodline power, but a legendary fire wizard and a Tier 3 elemental equipment should be able to. With the addition of these two masterminds, the somewhat stagnant situation of the battle immediately became lively again. Although the elemental equipment was powerful enough, it was only against ordinary Tier 3 wizards. Facing face-smashing Jia Lu, who stood at the peak of Tier 3 wizards, Grim did not feel at ease sending him to his death. Although face-smashing Jia Lu was starting to go soft on the poison corpses, if it were an elemental equipment, he would definitely not be stingy with his bloodline power. Instead, he would destroy this important helper of Grimm's. Hence, today's battle was completely different. The elemental equipment remained at the back and turned into a cannon. It held the magic ray cannon on its shoulder and madly fired at face-smashing Jia Lu at the highest frequency. On the other hand, Grimm's body was engulfed in flames, and he turned into a 3-meter-tall flame giant, approaching his opponent step by step. Such a strange scene not only surprised face-smashing Jia Lu, but also the many Central Continent wizards who had gathered in Fort Kothrin to watch the battle in silence. Elemental wizards. Shouldn't they be in a safe position and madly pouring long-range spells on their enemies? Why were elemental wizards now starting to engage in melee combat? So what would happen when a bloodline wizard with 39 points of strength and an elemental wizard with 39 points of mental force clashed? Everyone could not help but hold their breaths and wait, as if they had sensed the sudden surge of violent killing intent on the battlefield. The poisoned corpses that were advancing wave after wave finally stopped their suicidal footsteps. Densely packed together under the mountain of corpses, they raised their heads and silently watched the two sorcerers who represented the pinnacle of the sorcerer world's strength slowly approach each other. At this moment, face-smashing Jia Lu had turned into a tall human figure covered in a thick layer of purplish-black blood. His leather armor, leather pants, and exposed skin were continuously dripping with sticky, smelly black blood. His feet, which were wearing strange leather boots, had sunk deep into the pile of flesh and blood. Any slight movement would cause a small collapse of the mountain of corpses. He did not wear any metal armor, nor did he wear too much magic equipment. For face-smashing Jia Lu, his strong physique and powerful magic resistance were enough to rival the pinnacle of the pinnacle of the pinnacle of rank 3 magic equipment. Therefore, out of confidence in his body and strength, face-smashing Jia Lu almost never wore any metal armor. Even the leather armor he was wearing now only provided some similar effects, such as levitation or cleansing spells. In terms of defense, their effects were infinitely close to zero. Perhaps face-smashing Jia Lu only wore them to cover his terrifying body. Only when he was so close to his opponent did Grimm see the true appearance of the strange longsword in face-smashing Jia Lu's hand. It was a terrifying magic sword that possessed a strange power. The blade of the sword was about half a meter wide, with a diamond-shaped ridge in the middle that extended from the hilt to the edge of the sword. It was unknown what material Jia Lu used to forge this magic sword. The entire blade was pitch black, and there were strange inscriptions carved on it. Every time face-smashing Jia Lu held the magic sword, the runes and inscriptions on the blade would light up one after another, and an indescribably terrifying aura would spread out. Grimm carefully examined it. From the radiance of the energy emitted by the magic sword, he could determine that it was still a rank 3 magic equipment. However, compared to an ordinary rank 3 magic equipment, it was slightly more powerful, and there were signs that its consciousness was coming to life. Grimm dared to say that if face-smashing Jia Lu was lucky enough to advance to rank 4, as long as he nurtured it patiently, within 100 years, this magic sword would have the chance to advance by 1 rank and become an extremely rare rank 4 magic equipment. When that time came, with this rank 4 magic sword that was completely compatible with his attributes, face-smashing Jia Lu would not be at a disadvantage even if he were to fight against veteran rank 4 magi. From a certain point of view, the potential of this rank 3 magic sword was even greater than Saden's divine ring. Of course, this did not mean that Saden's divine ring was of poor quality. It was just that Saden's divine ring was forged according to the attributes of a holy knight. Falling into the hands of a legendary fire wizard like Grimm, Saden's divine ring would naturally not be able to receive sufficient nourishment from the power of the holy light. Therefore, it was impossible for it to continue evolving after casting its pearls before swine. looking at the tall man standing 30 meters away from him. A stiff smile finally appeared on Jia Lu's horrifying face. Good. Very good. You won my respect for the first time. Regardless of the outcome of today's battle, based on your courage, I'm definitely going to befriend you. After saying this, face-smashing Jia Lu's body trembled, and an incomparably violent force swept across his entire body like a halo. The thick blood paste and minced meat on the surface of his body were shaken away by the violent force, and then crushed into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Then it was pushed out in all directions by the invisible force that broke out of his body. Taking advantage of the moment when their vision was blocked by the bloody mist, face-smashing Jia Lu stomped on the ground, creating a wave of blood that was tens of meters high. His body, under the tremendous recoil, rushed to Grim's side at lightning speed. The strange demonic sword released an unprecedentedly thick sword aura halo, which quickly wrapped around Grim's flaming body. Go to hell! With an earth-shattering roar, the violent black sword aura instantly engulfed all the flames. Seeing this scene, the many magi in front of the magic water screen could not help but feel their hearts tighten. This was especially true for the Scarlet Magi, who were represented by Mary and the other two. They clenched their fists, their faces flushed red, and their eyes widened. They were so nervous that they could not breathe. Did that legendary fire wizard really get killed by his opponent's violent attack because of a moment of carelessness? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.